members, you may open the doors. Matters of privilege and recognition of guests, the Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise here in the Legislature. Welcome back to everyone. Not a bad day out there. Lots of traps on the wharf. Can't wait till the weekend, Mr. Speaker. Just want to recognize a few Islanders out there. PEI's own Andrea McKenna has been named one of the most influential women in Canadian agriculture. Andrea has worked tirelessly with the East Prince Agri-Environment Association excuse me, and truly demonstrates that farmers can be the best stewards of our environment. And I look forward to hearing Andrea share her story on Ag Annex Talks podcast. Mr. Speaker, the Virtual Student Design Expo at UPEI from the School of Sustainable Design Engineering are showcasing their end-of-year projects for 230 students, and I believe that happens tomorrow on Wednesday. Most people, I guess, in the House would know, but want to share with Islanders that we do have enhanced border screening at the bridge. There's some rapid testing happening, and I know I've heard from a truck driver already who is very happy and appreciative that we are doing that. I know a number of the golf courses are opening. Belfast Highland Greens is opened. I hear it's in great shape. I haven't been out yet myself. But the province does have a link on their government website, public health measures while golfing. So I guess we'll say it's our COVID etiquette on the golf course. And make sure that you check that out if you plan on going out and spending a day enjoying the long walk, let's say, and the nature. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say I received my COVID test this morning, and I want to thank everyone at the clinic. It was very efficient and done in a very friendly and timely manner. And I just want to thank all the people that are working there and all Islanders who are showing up to get their COVID test. I hope everyone. Sorry, vaccine. Thank you. And I just want to wish everyone a great day. And Mr. Speaker, wonderful sold-out crowd at the Breakfast for the Babies at the racetrack on Tuesday morning. Lots of new 2-year-olds that we hope will be racing. We hope there'll be stake races, but sold-out event. And again, done in the way that we have to around COVID, but it's just great to see that happening, and you know, it's a sign of spring and what's to come for the summer. So we hopefully we can do it in a safe and healthy way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks, Matt.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And I want to start out by congratulating the Federation of PEI Municipalities on a great event yesterday. Their second online AGM, and I know that a couple of other members of this House, the Minister of Fisheries and Communities, of course, and the member for Tignish Palmer Road, also contributed to the online meeting. So congratulations to Bruce McDougall and to all of the team who organized that. It was a very flawless event, very informative, and I want to send my personal congratulations to Peter Meggs, who was lauded yesterday. He is, of course, no longer lives on PEI. He moved and therefore had to concede his position on Cornwall Council. He now lives in Cornwall, Ontario, or as he referred to it yesterday, Lesser Cornwall, which I thought was really cute. Anyway, congratulations. Thanks to Peter and again to Bruce and all the team who put that event yesterday together. I also want to congratulate a friend of mine who just found out, I believe it was this morning, that she has won the Stomping Tom Connors Award for this year's ECMA, and that's Tara McLean. Congratulations to her. And that, of course, is for her long-time contributions to East Coast music, which continue to this day. She's an extraordinary person and a beautiful human being, and I had the pleasure yesterday of spending some time with Tara. Nothing to do with music. It was an interview regarding a documentary that's being made on the ice walk that happened a few weeks ago. And Eliza Knockwood and Tara were there and the team, and they've put together what promises to be a really stunning documentary of the event. So I look forward to seeing that. So congratulations to Tara, and thank you for being the special person you are. Finally, I'd like to mention that the PEI Writers Guild and the PEI Libraries are hosting a virtual showcase celebrating local poets here on Prince Edward Island and in honor of Poetry Month. And the Zoom event is tonight, and it's at 6 o'clock, and it will feature readings by a number of island poets: Tony Davis, Julie Pelsier-Lush, who of course is is the, oh my gosh, I've forgotten her title now. Poet Laureate for Prince Edward Island, excuse me, Julie. Charity Becker, Nicola Lewis Kemp, Donna Wigmore, Autumn Banks, Jennifer Platts Fleming, Roderick McDonald, and Chris Wilson. So congratulations to all of them, and I'm sure that will be a lovely event tonight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great to be back again for a new week, and I'd like to say hello to everyone back in the District of Evangeline-Muscush and anyone that's watching on Eastlink. And before I say much more, I'd just like to say a special hello to my wife's uncle, Jerry, who lives in St. John, New Brunswick in a community care facility. And my wife and her mother, Mary, and her brother, David, are going to call him this afternoon on a Zoom call. And I know he'll be happy to know that I said hello to him, and I'm sure they'll pass that on. And I wish Jerry good health. And go Habs, go, Jerry. Okay, Mr. Speaker, this past weekend was a great early start to the golf courses, and they seem to be busy. And Islanders were out cleaning their yards and roadways. And also wharfs across the province were just a buzz of activity with the approaching lobster season coming. I'm pleased to hear that the lobster fishers are experiencing a more certain and positive start to the season this year versus last year. Workers are in place, plants are ready to process, and market certainly has significantly improved over last year. I would also like to recognize and congratulate Gordy Dwyer of Stratford for his position as assistant coach for Canada at the Under-18 World Championships being held in Texas. It's a great accomplishment to be able to represent one's country at an international tournament, and Gordy will represent PEI in Canada very well. I wish Team Canada all the best in the upcoming tournament. Also, I would like to thank Bruce McDougall and the Federation of Municipalities for their meeting yesterday. Unfortunately, I had a prior commitment, I couldn't go, but the honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road attended, and as always, I understand they had a very good, productive meeting, so I wish them well. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's certainly wonderful to be back today after being off for a week, quote unquote off, post-surgery. Mr. Speaker, I want to extend a huge thank you to all the folks at the QEH who looked after me so well, and also to everyone who had reached out with their thoughts and kindness, and my husband who makes an incredible nurse, caretaker, cook, all of the above, babysitter, looking after me last week, as well as my parents who looked after my dear children. So it was very much an experience. I'd never had surgery before, but certainly an experience for me. And I just, again, can't say enough words of gratitude to all the folks who have been so kind and good to me over the last week and a half. Mr. Speaker, but as I say, it is really good to be back in here. I watched you all last week. You're doing an incredible job in here. Some interesting debates, certainly learning from all of my colleagues continuously, so I appreciate all your continuous work. Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to take an opportunity to congratulate the individuals on their recent appointments to the Advisory Council on the Status of Women. I know some of you are watching today. Mr. Speaker, Kathy Rose was appointed as chairperson of the council, Serena Smith as vice chairperson, and Garima Mishra as a member. Mr. Speaker, I can't say enough words to describe my gratitude for the Advisory Council and all the work that they do advising government. I've had so many wonderful meetings and conversations with the members and the staff there, and I look forward to continuous working relationship with them and to meeting our new members as well. So, Mr. Speaker, again, wonderful to be back. It's an honor and a privilege, and I do want to extend my hello to the folks in District 9. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome to listeners from my district, Brighton and elsewhere. And also a shout out to residents in 2 houses in the Hillsborough development. The reason I mentioned these houses are many. They were my first houses on PEI after the ARC, and they were built to prove that small energy efficient houses could be built for $32,000 and with just 1 tank of oil per year needed for heat and hot water. I imagine that house is worth a bit more these days. They also featured pressure-treated wooden foundations the first time this was used for a basement on PEI. And as this was new to the contractor, our office, architects, technicians, and secretary all showed up a Saturday morning to help build it. I want to point out to the honourable member from O'Leary and Inverness that the construction involved nailing 5 20-penny hot galvanized nails per stud upwards above our heads. As it turned out, I was the only person able to do this task. So there. Further up in the building, we built regular walls. There were no building inspectors at the time, but CMHC, who provided the mortgage, did inspect to NBC standards and noted to our horror that the lumber was not stamped nor kiln dried. But this turned out to be easily solved. Qualified wood graders simply inspected the wood in place, and the contractor measured the moisture with a $100 meter bought from Home Hardware. And the houses are, of course, still standing proud at the west end of Patterson Drive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Did I miss anyone? Okay. Member statement. The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent years across Canada, police have come under increased scrutiny as details and footage of police conduct have come to light. Concerns have been wide-ranging and have touched on areas like the treatment of BIPOC Canadians, conduct during wellness checks and mental health calls, and the police response to sexual-based offences. The police complaints process is one of the primary options available to a person who wishes to report concerns about police conduct. In a 1997 report, Dr. Maurice Hayes identified the following as objectives of a police complaints system. 1, ensure the highest standard of conduct for individual police officers. 2, improve police performance. 3, satisfy the complainant. And 4, enhance public confidence in the police. As legislators, it is our job to ensure our police complaints process makes it easier, not harder, for Islanders to submit complaints about police conduct. Having appropriate, efficient, and transparent complaints processes are important to ensure police services remain accountable to the communities they serve and that police services preserve public confidence. Unfortunately, Prince Edward Island has one of the most restrictive police complaints processes in the country. Islanders have only 6 months to file a complaint, to file a police conduct complaint, and those who receive and investigate complaints have no authority to hear complaints that are filed outside of that window, even if it would be in the public interest to do so. Regardless of whether a complaint is ultimately founded or not, the failure to consider a complaint because of a prohibitive time requirement neither satisfies a complainant nor enhances public confidence. Islanders deserve a police complaint process that is based on best practices. I'm pleased to announce that I will be introducing legislation to expand the time period in which Islanders may file a police conduct complaint from 6 months to 12 months, which is consistent with most provinces in Canada. The bill will also create a discretionary power that permits a complaint to be heard outside of the 12-month period if there are good reasons to do so. Islanders are welcome to provide feedback through our website, peigreencaucus.ca. Mr. Speaker, while this bill is quite limited in scope, I believe there are other aspects of the Police Act that require closer scrutiny. For example, provisions that do not allow witnesses of police misconduct to file a police complaint in relation to that misconduct. And I look forward to having further discussions with community stakeholders this summer to identify gaps in our Police Act and possible solutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the early 1800s, James Maitland, the 8th Earl of Lauderdale, wrote an inquiry into the nature and origin of public wealth, in which he introduced the concept that has become known as the Lauderdale Paradox, which states there is an inverse correlation between public wealth and private wealth. An increase in one can only come at the cost of a decrease in the other. Maitland theorized that private riches chokes off public wealth. This is done to devalue the public wealth, to create scarcity. In 1971, the social theorist Murray Bookchin wrote, "A century ago, scarcity had to be endured. Today, it has to be enforced." The paradox has been used to evaluate public wealth such as water, housing, basic income, and even GDP. Often, private wealth and public wealth are put at odds with each other, creating artificial scarcity that generates pressures for competitive productivity. This happens when capitalism has thrown the balance off. If we are to abandon artificial scarcity as the motivating force of economic expansion and seek an economic environment of abundance, we'll need metrics that align progress with public wealth. An example of this is when increased pollution makes clean air scarce and the government legislates to recreate the balance. However, what it means for something to be scarce needs to be defined. This is where the government gets involved. But when it comes to protecting public wealth, government shouldn't make it a unilateral decision. The public should also get a say. Land is a public wealth. The lands of PEI belong to the first peoples of this land. Ownership in today's terms is merely caretaking for future generations, but make no mistake, land is a public wealth that has been trusted to farmers to take care of for generations. Arable land is scarce. Access to pricing confirms this. We know land purchase prices are steadily increasing, and last week, Farm Credit Canada reported that the rent-to-price ratio in PEI is twice the national average, so land is also expensive to lease. There is an imbalance that is being felt by our farmers who are unable to access land in a fair and equitable way. The public trust belongs to all islanders, to all residents for mutual benefit. When it is out of balance, we expect islanders to be able to speak up to protect the public wealth. When islanders are pitted against each other, government is not successfully doing its job. Government's job is to protect the public wealth. And if they don't step up and do that, all islanders will suffer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I may have your indulgence before I make my member's statement, just to extend a greeting to somebody who's watching online. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to extend a greeting to the Link 4 class currently learning at the Holland College on Belmont Street. Mr. Speaker, they're actually studying you today. So perhaps you, like Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, might like to say hello to the Link 4 class as well.
I will.
Okay. Thank
I'll
you,
see how the report goes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that.
Gonna take them a while.
Mr. Speaker, Fusion Charlottetown is a grassroots non-profit organisation that empowers the voices of 18 to 40-year-olds in shaping the future of Charlottetown. Their vision is a city where young people thrive because they are engaged and are participating in the decision-making process. As part of Fusion Earth Week, the group organised the Confederation Trail cleanup this past Saturday, which brought together enthusiastic volunteers with supplies and prizes to tackle cleaning up a main section of the trail. 3 groups of volunteers cleaned up with stations at the Towers Road, behind the mall, the Farm Centre, and at Longworth Avenue, collecting piles of garbage at each location. Additionally, at the Farm Centre, exhibitors with booths focused on sustainability included the Charlottetown Tool Library, Renewable Lifestyle Solar, the Burley farmers who grew 6,000 pounds of produce at the Mount last year, representatives from Monsieur Levrac, providing Charlottetown's first zero-waste shop with products sourced from Canada, everything from ADL milk to laundry detergent to bamboo toothbrushes, and the Charlottetown Garden Sharing Initiative, a new creative and free project to connect people who want to grow food with homeowners who are open to having someone do gardening on their property in exchange for a share of the produce they grow. I would like to extend my congratulations and thanks to Fusion Charlottetown for organising an entire week of great and informative activities around Earth Week, and for the many sponsors and businesses who stepped up to help make it happen and provide prizes. And thanks, too, to this dynamic organisation that amplifies the voices of youth when their voices are too often missing from the tables where decisions are made. I'll leave you with this statement from the Fusion website. We believe all the best is yet to come. We believe that by bringing the youth voice to the table, Charlottetown will benefit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as notice. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today in the House to provide clarity on debate in the House from last week about Health PEI's contract with Maple for virtual care. And during that debate, Mr. Speaker, I had indicated that I would bring back additional information. Mr. Speaker, this valuable service is offered to all islanders on the patient registry as a means to access primary care virtually. Mr. Speaker, all patient information is kept confidential. Maple cannot share this information with any third parties. This is a top priority for our government, and I want to assure islanders that their information is safe and kept confidential. Mr. Speaker, physicians who provide the service are mainly located on PEI. Additional physicians are being encouraged to take part. These physicians are paid based on the physician's master agreement, the same way physicians using traditional delivery methods are paid. Also, Mr. Speaker, I want to clarify that no Freedom of Information request was made to obtain a copy of the Maple Incorporated contract, as previously stated by the member of the opposition. However, Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to table that contract in the House late last week. Thank you.
For a first question, I'll call on the leader of the official opposition.
Thank you so much, Speaker. This government, just like the last one, has been trying to get into e-gaming. The Minister of Finance, of course, has said the online casino is not about making money for the province. Another thing it would have in common with the first e-gaming fiasco, because that cost the government at least $1.5 million. A question to the Minister of Finance. Would you still move ahead with an online casino if it was not profitable for Prince Edward Island?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I'd like to clarify, this is not e-gaming. That was the previous government. It was something that was offshore that we had no idea what the details were about. We knew nothing about it until it broke in the news. This is about the Atlantic Lottery Corporation, a crown corporation owned by the 4 provincial provinces. Honourable Member, this is not e-gaming in no way, shape or form. And I have said already in this House that we are doing it to give islanders a safer, more responsible way of gambling online.
The Honourable Leader of the official opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. Last week, the same Minister of Finance made a commitment in this House that all proceeds from the new online casino would be dedicated to supports for mental health and addiction services. We know that online gambling poses particular threats for problem gamblers, and evidence suggests that since COVID hit, more gamblers than ever have moved online to play. As I said at the time, that feels a little bit like government knowing there's a fire and choosing to pour gasoline on it, and then promising to give firefighters a little bit extra money to try and put it out. That does not strike me as ethical or responsible governance. To the same minister, estimates for profits that will flow from an online casino vary, but once established, it will no doubt be in excess of $1 million a year. Does this mean that government funding for mental health and addiction services will also increase itself by that amount each year?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, Honourable Member, I'd like to point out to you that we have not flipped the switch on this. We did have a meeting. We wanted to discuss it in Cabinet and to be open and transparent about how we move forward with this. We are looking at doing this. We are not alone in Atlantic Canada to do this. Honourable Member, the proceeds that we do receive from the profits we receive from online gaming will go into mental health and addictions. Honourable Member, I've discussed it with the Department of Health to look at ways and programs that we need to put in place, but let's not forget that this has been accessible to Canadians. 90% of Canadians now have access to this in a responsible, more responsible way. Honourable Member, we want to do this in a responsible way, and I will add on top of that, there has been no record of any increase in online gambling, and this has been going on, started 10 years ago. That is exactly what was told to us and was said by the person that came to committee. There is no marked increase in online gaming because of online regulated sites in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of Official Opposition.
So we're going to get to that particular question a little bit further in the series. So far I've asked 2 questions, and so far the Minister has evaded answering either of them. The argument that this government...
Asked them all last week.
The argument that this government has repeatedly put forward to justify throwing gasoline on the online gambling fire is that people are already... Do I have the floor, Speaker?
Yes.
People are already doing this on unregulated illegal sites, and that, as the Minister puts it, offering this service in a more regulated platform will repatriate those funds lost to unregulated sites. To the same Minister, despite the comment that you've just made, many other provinces have established online casinos, and they obviously operate in the same environment, competing with unregulated illegal players. What evidence exists to support the claim that you just made that the money gamblers spend on unregulated illegal sites has been recaptured in these provinces with their regulated government sites?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Honourable Member,
Evidence. Does she have the floor?
yes, thank you.
You're indignant
I
about
have
it.
said over and over again that this is going to be done in a responsible, regulated way. It's not e-gaming. I know you're trying to make headlines over there. This is not e-gaming. It has nothing to do with e-gaming. This is an online regulated platform that right now 90% of Canadians can access in a safer environment to gamble online. And I'll also point out that less than 2% of Prince Edward Islanders have a problem with gambling, and we have the supports there for them. And I have also pointed out that it tends to be a dependency with whether it's alcohol or drugs. So we want to ensure that the funds are there. And yes, I did say, Honourable Member, before, that the profits we receive through online gaming will go into mental health and addictions. I did say that when I answered the last question. I will continue to stand on that. That is additional funding, Honourable Member. We have nothing in the operating budget in this coming year that will be revenue from online gambling. There is no day that we're going to flip the switch on this, and there is absolutely no anticipation of having revenues from that within this next fiscal year. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. I'm not trying to make headlines here. I'm trying to make sense of the numerous contradictions coming from this minister over the last few months. Last night on Compass, Professor David Hodgins.
Go ahead, Member.
Thank you, Speaker. Last night on Compass, Professor David Hodgins, who presented here in this room for the Standing Committee from the University of Calgary, discussed this issue with host Louise Martin. He provided evidence that while gambling overall has gone down since the pandemic hit, the subset of people who gamble online has actually increased. We know that there is an association between people being involved in online gambling and problem gambling. Dr. Hodgins also went on to say that creating new platforms locally, and this is critical, will actually expand the market. In other words, not capture those people who are already gambling online using illegal sites, but lure islanders to play who would otherwise not do so. A question to the Minister: do you refute this evidence from an expert, or do you concede that eGaming 2.0 will actually create new potentially problem gamblers, particularly when you introduce it during a pandemic?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to point out to the Honourable Member that through online gambling with Atlantic Lottery, it is a regulated site. There are time limits, there are maximum bets, your age is verified, your identity is verified, there are responsible gaming supports as well. So, Honourable Member, there will be another way for islanders to gamble. I will be the first one to admit that. But right now, you can go on your computer and see how many sites you can bring up within seconds where you can go and gamble offshore in an unregulated way with no regulations, no verification of who you are or if you're a legal age. Honourable member, we are doing this for the protection of islands, not the exploitation, and this is not gaming in any way, shape, or form. And honourable member, if you are not happy with the millions and millions of dollars that we receive in this province from Atlantic Lottery Corporation every year, then maybe you can suggest where we can take those funds from, and if we're going to get rid of gambling. You cannot bury your head in the sand. We regulate liquor, we regulate tobacco, we regulate cannabis. Now we're going to regulate gambling. It's as simple as that. Get rid of them all.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. In a letter to the President of Atlantic Lotteries Corporation dated April 29th last year and tabled in the House last week, the Minister wrote this, and I quote, I quote, "Our government..."
Members?
Minister wrote this, "Our government is fully focused on helping islanders weather a public health emergency. We are not interested in expanding access to gambling online at this time. I will contact you after the pandemic if we think it makes sense for PEI to join the other shareholders in offering new products." End quote. A question to the Minister.
He'll change his mind tomorrow.
Question to the Minister. Are we not still in a pandemic? Talk about change of mind. Why the change of heart?
Change your mind every day.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And honourable member, I did not have a change of mind or a change of heart. I am not contradicting myself. At that point, Atlantic Lottery wanted all 4 provinces to be part of the online gambling rollout. And I said, we are not interested at this time, and we are not interested in the pandemic. After that, I did have a conversation with the other finance ministers, including the former finance minister for Nova Scotia. We discussed what this would look like and how we could move forward. And I said, we are not ready to flip the switch on this yet, but we will be open and transparent, bring it to Cabinet, have a discussion, and look at the options and what this would look like for Prince Edward Island. No change of heart, no change of mind. We're looking at it. It hasn't happened yet, honourable member, but from all the members across, you think that it was going on. You can go on ALC website right now. You cannot do those gambling games online right now. You can click on New Brunswick and you can see you're able to online gamble there. But if you click on as a Prince Edward Islander, you are not allowed to gamble. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Let's be clear that the discussion that was had in Cabinet and the decision made in Cabinet was in December last year, way before the references that the Minister just made. In an email from a Department of Finance official also to the President of Atlantic Lotteries Corporation, the official wrote, and I quote, "Gaming priorities for Prince Edward Island have always been determined by the PEI Lotteries Commission, with the finance liaising with other departments and agencies to gather input and advance policies," unquote. A question to the same minister. If gaming priorities are set by the PEI Lotteries Commission, why did a FOIP request by our office of the Commission produce 0 records, not a single record of the online casino?
Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable member, the discussion was had amongst the 4 finance ministers in an ALC meeting and ongoing meetings. I mean, we talked to each other. We were talking more than weekly at one point, and it did come up. That is where the discussion was had. I reached out to my Cabinet colleagues. I said, this is something that we should look at. We should see what parameters need to be put in place. I'm not there yet. I still am not there. But, honourable member, we are going to do what's right for Islanders. I've committed that any profits we have from online gambling will go back into mental health and addictions. Honourable member, this is happening all over the world. It's happening in Canada, and in 90% of Canadians have the opportunity now to go on a regulated site that is safer and has more verifications, and we want to give Prince Edward Islanders the same opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. Well, while the Lotteries Commission FOIP request produced no records, we were able to FOIP and get over 100 pages of records from the Department of Finance on the online casino. It's clear that government went outside the normal process to approve this online gaming initiative. Does that sound familiar to you? But perhaps the Minister can explain this to the House. Question to the Minister. Why did you go around the PEI Lotteries Commission, who, as we know from a letter from somebody in your own department, are the people who make the decisions on new gambling products? Why did you go around the PEI Lotteries Commission to push through this new e-gaming scheme?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, we're not at a point yet where we're ready to push that button to turn it on. So this has been a conversation that we have had amongst the finance ministers within Atlantic Canada. We all have discussions regularly about ALC. Honourable Member, we are not there yet. I will tell you that over and over again, we are not there yet. We want to ensure that the regulations are what we want for Prince Edward Island, that the limits are what we want for Prince Edward Island, and I will continue to work with Atlantic Lottery Corporation to ensure that that happens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. I just want to remind the Minister that there was an order in Council from December the 22nd, 2020, where this decision was actually made. Are you saying here today that that decision was not made then? Or are you saying that that decision was, I don't understand. Too many contradictions here, Minister. You made a decision behind closed doors in Cabinet and you were going to go ahead with this. Now you're saying that you're not going to press that button. But my goodness, you've had your finger on that switch for the last 6 months or more. What is going on here?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Member, we have not pressed that button. I brought it to Cabinet to have the discussion. Our orders in Council are made public. We want it to be open and transparent for Islanders to see that we are looking into doing this. It hasn't happened yet. We want to make sure, again, that we have the regulations in place, that we have the bet limits in place. We want to do what's right for Prince Edward Islanders. I will continue to stand by that statement. And Honourable Member, again, I will say the profits will go back into mental health and addictions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Mr. Speaker, the recently announced Tourism Activation Grant Programme is intended to provide tourism businesses in PEI with a non-repayable financial contribution towards eligible expenses to assist with capital or maintenance costs associated with the 2021 season. The programme is being administered by CBDC in partnership with the Tourism Association. At this point, I'd like to extend my thanks to the Minister for assisting constituents with some inquiries about this programme last week, but today I have further questions. Question for the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture. Is there any cap on the size of business that can apply to ensure that this fund is being directed to the small businesses who need it the most and can't qualify for other financing options available to larger businesses?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. So when we designed this program, we had a $3 million pot of money, and we wanted to make sure it went into the hands of the tourism operators that were hurt the most. So we put a criteria on it that all operators had to be down 30%, and that's the criteria we're going with as of today. Now, in saying that, it could be subject to change. We're rolling out to see how far the $3 million goes, and we might be making changes if need to as the program rolls out further. Thank you.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Under the eligibility criteria for this programme, accommodation businesses cannot qualify if they have only one property. And we've been hearing from existing tourism businesses, some of which have been in operation for years, that they don't qualify as a result. What I see are rules that look like they may be designed to exclude Airbnbs without saying that you're excluding Airbnbs. Let me be clear, I am not in favour of Airbnbs receiving government assistance, as they have alternative options to generate revenue, like renting their properties as long-term rentals. But that doesn't mean that existing traditional cottage accommodations should be excluded from getting financial assistance, especially as they are often located in rural locations. Questions for the same Minister. What will you do to ensure that this grant programme does not discriminate against traditional tourism cottage businesses?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. So you're absolutely right. What we looked at the criteria in that, so there's 1,900 rental properties right now in Prince Edward Island. So when you're working with $3 million and you have 1,900 rental properties, it was going to cost the province in the proximity of $30 million, which all these programs we've rolled out all along, I always said we would roll them out to the best of our ability. We don't have $30 million. But in saying that, Honourable Member, a lot of these Airbnb and short-term rentals, they have secondary income. So they are people with full-time jobs that do have jobs to go to right now, and that's why that was excluded as well. So the long and the short of it, we had a $3 million budget, and we want to make sure it went into the pockets of the tourism operators that were most affected, as well as the ones that are employing people. We did not want to see 2,000 tourism operators lay off any more employees this summer. We want to make sure they kept working.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to clarify, there are tourism operators who have cottages and they have maybe just one cottage. Because of the way the rules are determined in this program, if you have a single property, you cannot apply. And I said I recognize that this may be designed to exclude those Airbnb operators, but many of these operators are not Airbnbs. They're cottage operators who've had these these cottages for years, but they're being excluded from this program, and they're the smallest of small businesses. Without this kind of support, they may not be able to reopen at all. So my clarification, Minister, is that we have a very distinct small business where there is one single cottage that's being offered as a rental accommodation. Would you be able to expand the program to make them eligible?
The Honourable Minister for Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Honourable Member, you're absolutely right. I know when we rolled this program out, that was one of my first questions, is because we have 1,900 single cottage operators on the island, and I want to always try and help everybody out when we roll out these programs. But when the cost factor come back and you start putting another 1,900 additional properties with the cap on there, we were in the vicinity of $30 million that we just don't have. And this pandemic could last a while, and we need to make sure our contingency money that we have that is there to roll out more programs as we go. And of course, all these programs we've rolled out could be subject to change. As of this morning, I sat down with the department again to make sure we're proactive, because you look what's going on in Atlantic Canada right now and all the cases. We want to make sure there's programs that are going to be ready if we have to change on the fly, and that's what we're working at towards today there, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate recognising that obviously things are changing very quickly, and you know, obviously the news that's coming out from other provinces and the shift and change we've had even in the last couple of weeks. You know, tourism operators are obviously really nervous, as are all small businesses. My follow-up question, knowing how much interest there is in this activation grant, and that already the central zone is fully subscribed, we're looking at probably half of the fund has already gone out the door. Minister, is it time to think that with tourism, hospitality and culture being a priority for this government, is the $3 million fund enough?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as of Friday, that program, we had 257 applications in. 95 were approved, and there's just a touch over $1 million. 1.1 million has gone out. Obviously, we're always going to monitor the programs, but you look over the course of the year, Prince Edward Island this government has rolled out more programs, not only to small business, but tourism operators and PEI than any other province in the country. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to work and adapt with the times. We're following all the programs. If the program is underutilized, we're certainly going to extend it. And I'm not saying we won't be able to go back to the pot when the time comes, Mr. Speaker, but we want to make sure that we've got the ability to do that. And at the end of the day, we got to be responsible as a government and make sure our funds last as long as this pandemic lasts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is clear we are in the middle of a crisis in healthcare. Access to care is severely limited, and we are hearing that vacancies are causing real problems for too many Islanders. This situation has clearly gotten worse in recent months, and Islanders have heard no real plan to address these growing shortages. Question to the Minister of Health. Do you feel we are in a health crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I do thank the Leader of the Third Party for the question. Are we in a health crisis? Maybe he could elaborate. We're certainly in a worldwide pandemic, which without a doubt is a crisis. And it's one that here in Prince Edward Island has been handled extremely well under the guidance of our frontline health workers. But also, Mr. Speaker, and I will be bringing forward both the Department Health and Wellness budget onto the floor of the House here shortly, as well as Health PEI. And I think when you look at the initiatives that this government is taking and has committed to take over the next time period or the next 4 or 5 year period, Mr. Speaker, that it shows our commitment to providing health care services to Prince Edward Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the most critical positions for a functioning healthcare system is nurses. Whether it's a hospital, mental health clinic, a long-term care facility, anywhere healthcare services are offered, nurses are required. As of yesterday, PEI had 69 external nursing vacancies and 93 internal vacancies, for a combined total of 162 vacant nursing positions. I will table these documents later, Mr. Speaker. This number doesn't even capture private sector vacancies such as private community care and long-term care facilities or home care services. Question to the Minister. What are you doing to respond to this large and ever-growing number of nurse vacancies?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly do agree with the Leader of the Third Party of the importance of nurses within our healthcare system, right there, front and center, right on the front line. With regard to what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, we are doing a tremendous amount more than the previous administration ever did with regard to recruitment of healthcare professionals, and certainly with regard to nurses. You look at the increase that we have for our recruitment incentive, Mr. Speaker, going from $1,100, as I've mentioned here previously, up to $5,000. This is showing results and will continue to show results, Mr. Speaker, and that is just one of the initiatives that this government has taken that we are working towards with regard to providing the very best health care possible to Prince Edward Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party, your second supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're looking forward to those results of that recruiting that the Minister's talking about. PEI now faces a situation where we are so short of nursing staff that an unexpected sickness or departure could have serious effects on our ability to deliver health care services. Just a few weeks ago, we heard of a situation where Islanders were being held in the ER for days, unable to be admitted due to a shortage of staff. We also see the Prince County Hospital and the town of Summerside taking it upon themselves, and kudos to them, to try to recruit nurses to work at that hospital. In fact, the documents I will table later today show over 400 vacancies across the system. Question to the Minister of Health. Is this the new model of nurse recruitment in PEI? Should individual healthcare facilities and municipalities be taking on the issue of nursing recruitment?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as compared to the previous administration, we work with our partners, and we have great foundations right across this province, right from Alberton right through to Surrey, and we do work with them and we partner with them. And I want to give a shout out to the foundation in Summerside for the initiative that they have taken there. Mr. Speaker, though, I also have to go back. What we have done, we have built substantially on the recruitment efforts, on the recruitment incentives this government is put in place for nurses, for doctors, right across the board, Mr. Speaker. Does this provide results overnight? I wish it did. Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. But we do have great incentives that we have built upon from the previous administration. And, Mr. Speaker, we will continue that. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know nurses are not the only area of health care to have large shortages. There's also a large number of vacancies at allied health professionals. Allied health professionals encompasses many important positions such as pharmacists, psychologists, respiratory therapists, and more. As of yesterday, PEI had 19 external vacancies and 27 internal vacancies, for a combined total of 46 allied health professional vacancies. And I will table these later, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Minister of Health. What recruiting and retention programs does government currently have in place specifically for allied health professionals?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I have to go back to what I've said before with regard to this government's commitment, recruiting right across the board whether it's nurses, whether it's RCWs, whether it's doctors, whether it's allied health professionals. And you look at the commitment that we have made, Mr. Speaker, an additional $1 million this year in recruitment, an additional $500,000 in retention, because as we know, every member on the floor of this legislature realizes that it's not only a recruitment challenge that we are addressing, but it's also a retention challenge that we need to address and that we will continue to address, Mr. Speaker. I had referenced the $5,000 in a return for service agreement for new nursing graduates, Mr. Speaker. But on top of that, we have put in place, if for nurses that be relocating here to the province, additional, Mr. Speaker, incentives for those individuals. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the vacancies and struggles we have regarding nurses and allied health professionals, there still remains 17,144 Islanders and growing daily who don't have access to a family doctor and no idea when they will gain access. The Premier has spoken in the past about giving up on the goal of establishing a doctor for every Islander, something that many Islanders found concerning. Currently, the government website is advertising for 7 family physicians to be located across various parts of the province, and I will table that later, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Minister of Health. If government secures successful candidates for these 7 family physician positions, how many Islanders are expected to come off the patient registry as a result?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, let's take a look just, for example, at the western part of the province. In the last year and a half, or a little bit more, there have been 4 new physicians that have been recruited to the West Prince area, Mr. Speaker. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, there's a doctor who is finishing up their residency as we speak, who has already signed an agreement to return to West Prince. So that is just one of the examples, Mr. Speaker, of the positive results that this government has seen with regard to recruitment of healthcare professionals, Mr. Speaker. You look back, the previous administration, for whatever reason, dropped the ball on this, Mr. Speaker. But we look, again, you look at the budget, an additional $4.11 million, Mr. Speaker, an additional $4.11 million for the delivery of primary health care services to Prince Edward Islanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party, a second complimentary.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. The physician shortage on PEI does not begin and end with family doctors. We are now seeking numerous specialist positions vacant, impacting the services that can be offered to a specific facility, or in the province as a whole. Both the province's major hospitals are seeking emergency room doctors for each facility as a variety of specialist vacancies that remain unfilled. And I will table that later. It appears we have shortages and vacancies all throughout the healthcare system, no matter where you look. Question to the Minister of Health. When do you anticipate the numerous vacant specialist positions to be filled at both the QUH and the PCH? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, Mr. Speaker, I do want to indicate my great appreciation as Minister to the work that is being done day in and day out, Mr. Speaker, by ones in both the Department of Health and Wellness and the Health PEI with regard to recruitment of professionals in our healthcare system, for our healthcare system, right across the board, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I talked here a few moments ago with regard to incentives that we provide as a province. And I do appreciate the Leader of the Third Party bringing this forward. It is an extremely important issue for all of Prince Edward Islanders. But that is why, as a government, Mr. Speaker, that we are taking action on this. And you look at the incentives that we do have for physicians. For example, psychiatry and anesthesia $80,000 signing bonus, Mr. Speaker. Other specialists, $40,000. General practitioners going to rural areas of Prince Edward Island, signing bonuses of $60,000 to $90,000, Mr. Speaker. We are out there, we're in the marketplace, we are providing the incentives that are required, and we are and will continue to get results. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question to the Minister of Finance. Back in the 90s, governments across Atlantic Canada made a big mistake. At the time, they allowed video lottery terminals into corner stores everywhere. And this resulted in a lot of real damage to families and our communities in Prince Edward Island. The damage spread far and wide, and many people lost their homes, their families, and their life savings. Finally, public pressure grew very intense, and the VLTs were limited to a few locations. Now this government has collaborated with Atlantic Lottery Corporation on a new plan to put the equivalent of VLTs in every home with an internet access, exploiting the pandemic. Given the lessons of the past, why is the minister participating in a plan to make gambling even more accessible to Islanders?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. An honourable member, Islanders have access to that in their homes right now. We're trying to avoid the offshore sites. We want Islanders to come back and do their gambling. And let's not forget, most people, the majority of people, do this for entertainment. We want to ensure that they have. Most people, more than 98%, do this for entertainment. It's no different than liquor and cannabis. We have negative effects from those, but they are regulated through the province. We want to do the same for gambling to ensure Islanders have a safe and regulated place to do it, and that the profits come back to Prince Edward Island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
So is this really about profits over people? That's what it sounds like. And that's where it seems to be going in that direction. We know that the Atlantic Lottery Corporation wants to make money. After all, there are large executive bonuses at stake. Last year during the pandemic, there was an expectation that gambling at VLT Lotto areas would drop. But Atlantic Lotto tried its best, even to the point of creating VLT hotlines to direct gamblers to the nearest machines. Question to the minister, did VLT revenues drop sharply in 2020?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And VLT revenues are dropping constantly. We know the way people gamble is changing. And yes, it is online. And yes, ALC wants to recoup and retain some of that market. It's part of what they plan as a business. And let's not forget, I mean, people think this money is going to some private individual. This is going to the 4 Atlantic provinces, and we know over $100 million is leaving Atlantic Canada every year through unregulated, illegal sites. Honourable Member, we want to ensure that Islanders have a safer and more regulated way to do online gambling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Then again,
Your
Mr.
second
Speaker,
supplementary.
I repeat that this is an exploitation. It's still coming out of their pockets. Our mental health system is broken at best on Prince Edward Island, and now we're telling them, spend more money on VLTs, spend more money on online gambling, and then we'll be there to save you at the end. It doesn't work that way. Our office reached out to Atlantic Lotto to find out the amount of island money that was fed into VLTs. I will table that information, Mr. Speaker. According to ALC, Islanders put in $68 million into VLTs, which works out to $425 for every single Islander. In return, only $53 million was returned in terms of actual printed prize tickets. That's a $15 million that individual Islanders lost on VLTs, which is less than the government's entire budget for addiction services. Question to the minister, how many dollars does ALC need to take from Islanders? How much is enough?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Honourable Member, I know you weren't part of the previous government when e-gaming was the talk, but what we are trying to do is provide a safe and regulated place for Islanders to gamble online, which they are doing already, and to avoid the issues and the problems that would be created by something like the e-gaming scheme of the former government. We want a safe and regulated safe site for Islanders to go online and gamble if they choose to do, And we will be there for Islanders who do need the supports, as we are now, and we will continue to do, whether it's for alcoholism, whether it's for, cannabis use. We have regulated sites for people to go and purchase those items. We know there will be problems with some people. We want to be there for those Islanders. This is no different, honourable member. We want a regulated site. 90% of Canadians have the opportunity now to go on a regulated site. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the provincial budget documents last year, the province collected close to $133 million in property taxes. Question to the Minister of Finance, how much of that $133 million in property taxes would be collected from non-resident property owners?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable member, I'm not sure of the percentage. I will definitely get that number and get back to you with it.
Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That would be great to have that number. Now, for more than 3 decades, the province has charged a higher property tax rate to non-resident property owners here on the island. It's been double, in fact. This measure was introduced by the government of the day as a way to try to slow down the buying up of coastal land here on PEI. Question to the same minister, how often is this double tax policy reviewed by government?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Honourable member, I think I could say that we're constantly reviewing our tax measures as we've done in this current operating budget. We've reduced the interest being charged on property tax. We are also exploring a vacancy tax that possibly could be put in place. And as with the federal budget, which was announced last week, there is talk of a vacancy tax federally. So we'll be working with our federal counterparts to see what that looks like. Thank you, honourable member.
Charlottetown, Winslow, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yeah, that vacancy tax that your department's looking at right now could be something very beneficial because with the Canadian Real Estate Association in March of this year, it was a record-setting price of homes in Charlottetown at just over $330,000 for purchasing price. That's almost 22% higher than it was this time last March. If you talk to any real estate agent on PEI, much of the real estate action on PEI is being driven by off-island buyers who are seeking a respite from the pandemic. It's great for sellers, but it is a little harder for first-time home buyers trying to enter the market. Question to the same minister, have you considered maybe increasing the rate charged to non-resident home buyers with the proceeds maybe going to help support affordable housing here for Islanders or for first-time home buyers trying to get into the housing market?
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and honourable member. We are reviewing that. We want to make sure that it's put in place in a way that we're not punishing cottage owners that have generations of family members here, but we want to ensure, I've said it myself, in our own eastern PEI area, there are a number of houses that are year-round that are vacant, and they are a Four Seasons house, and it's putting pressure on the demands for housing, but it also is eroding the fabric of rural PEI to have those houses empty. So we're working in the department. We started last fall looking at what this could look like, and now I know there was a call with our federal counterparts since the federal budget to see what this would look like, and we're working with the federal government to see how we could implement that in PEI.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. The minister has repeatedly said today that this government has not flipped the switch, as she put it, on their version of e-gaming. Now, you actually have switched that flipped that switch, Minister, with an order in Council on December the 22nd. Maybe you haven't read it. This isn't a suggestion in Council. It's not a hint in Council. It's not a provisional decision in Council. It's an order in Council, and I'm going to read some of it. Council authorises the Prince Edward Island Lotteries Commission to develop, organise, undertake, conduct and manage an enhanced digital platform, and it goes on. So, Minister, the order in Council has been made, that switch has been flipped. If mental health is such an important component of this, why did it take you over a year to reach out to your Department of Health regarding its gambling supports?
Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Honourable member, I have talked to the Department of Health but a number of my staff talk to the Department of Health on a regular basis. Do I talk to them every day? Do I talk to them every week? Absolutely not. But there are staff members who are involved with the decisions that will be made regarding Atlantic Lottery Corporation, who understand this is a decision that we need to make across departments. We will continue to work with the Department of Health. Exactly, with the Deputies Council. We will work with all government departments to ensure that we do this in the right way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Charlottetown, Victoria Park, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I promised myself that if I was ever to be elected in this House, that I would speak up for educators against the pervasive culture of silence that I and former colleagues have endured in our education system. There is a culture of silence in our island schools, and those that lose are our children. There are so many educators who want to speak out against the system, but they fear repercussions. There has recently been an outcry from parents who are desperately concerned about a secret shuffle of an administrator from one school where there were a number of complaints brought against them to another school. This kind of sweeping things under the rug by the powers that be does nothing to help break this culture of silence that our educators work in, or to build the public's trust in our education system. Question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning. I'm not asking for specifics of this individual case. Can you see how this would contribute to a toxic work environment for our educators, and what are you doing about it?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. Following my appointment as Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, I had the opportunity to sit down with the Honourable Member, and this was one of the first concerns that she had brought forward. Being a former teacher and a counsellor, her concerns were around teachers having that voice with the minister and with the deputy, and I can assure this House that that's something that I took right back to the department to get some insights regarding how do we make sure going forward that their voices are heard at my level. Recently, I'd already had suggested to the House that I did meet with the Teachers Federation, the advisory committee that is made up of teachers. I had also asked one of my directors to prepare a list of committees whereby there is teacher representation, and there are a number listed here, and I am certainly happy to share those with the House and table them. But I can assure this House, and I can assure the Honourable Member, that it is incredibly important to ensure that those voices are being heard in government with me. If there's ways to improve it, by all means, please bring forward your recommendations. But I am fully committed to making sure that I'm having those conversations, and I look forward to spending the summer going across this beautiful province and meeting with our educators and all those incredible staff working in the school system. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning, the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est avec grand plaisir que j'annonce le lancement d'une nouvelle bourse d'études pour les étudiants francophones. It gives me great pleasure to announce a new scholarship for island students looking to pursue French language post-secondary education. La nouvelle bourse d'études post-secondaires en français est une bourse pluriannuelle pour les étudiants de l'île de Prince-Édouard qui souhaitent faire des études postsecondaire dans un programme en français qui n'est pas offert dans la province. Les élèves qui obtiennent leur diplôme d'une école de langue française ou d'un programme d'immersion française à l'île de Prince-Édouard pourraient être admissibles à l'obtention d'une bourse ayant jusqu'à 1 500 $ par année pour des études collégiales et 2 000 $ par année pour un baccalauréat. Students who graduate from a French language school or French immersion program in Prince Edward Island may be eligible for up to $1,500 per year for college programs and $2,000 per year for a bachelor's degree. La bourse est financée par le gouvernement du Canada et le gouvernement de l'île de Prince-Édouard en collaboration avec la Société acadienne et francophone de l'île de Prince-Édouard. Réduire les barrières à l'éducation post-secondaire aidera les étudiants à suivre leur passion et poursuivre leurs études dans la langue de leur choix. Reducing barriers to post-secondary education will help students follow their passion and pursue higher learning in their field of interest. Les besoins du marché du travail en main-d'œuvre bilingue ne font que croître et cette nouvelle bourse sera une mesure positive pour appuyer la communauté acadienne et les francophones de l'île de Prince-Édouard. The labor market's need for a bilingual workforce is only increasing, and this new scholarship will be a positive measure to help strengthen our Acadian and francophone communities in Prince Edward Island. En tant que province, nous allons continuer de nous pencher sur des options pour améliorer l'accès à l'éducation postsecondaire et trouver des façons de garder nos diplômes dans la province. As a province, we will continue to look at options to improve access to post-secondary education and find more ways to retain island graduates in our province. Les étudiants peuvent en apprendre plus pour la nouvelle bourse d'études postsecondaires en français en visitant le site web de la Société acadienne et francophone de l'île de Prince-Édouard. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Merci, Monsieur l'orateur. Et c'est toujours une bonne nouvelle quand on facilite les choses et on enlève les barrières à l'éducation, surtout quand c'est pour un groupe qui ne sont pas toujours servis. Ça montre un engagement, une réalisation et soutien pour une langue officielle au Canada. La culture française à l'île est diverse. On a les Acadiens et plusieurs francophones de tous coins du monde. Alors, c'est très important qu'on montre cet engagement à garder la culture française vibrante et forte à l'île. Comme une élève française moi-même, qui a décidé à faire ses études en français, j'apprécie ces nouvelles et je suis certaine que ça va être une nouvelle très bienvenue pour les élèves tout autour de l'île. Alors, c'est important pour notre main-d'œuvre ici à l'île d'avoir les choix pour les gens d'avoir le service en français parce qu'on entend souvent que ce n'est pas là. Toujours, alors c'est une nouvelle bienvenue. Merci, Monsieur l'orateur.
The honourable leader of the third party.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. This is great news for PEI and French language students studying throughout the province. We have many great scholarships and bursaries for post-secondary students here in PEI. However, there is not many designated specifically for French language students, so this is welcomed development. PEI is a strong French community, and I am pleased to see government introducing a new scholarship specifically designed for them. This will allow more French students the opportunity to attend post-secondary education. While this is a welcome development, we still have more work to do to help the French community. We currently see individuals graduating from French programs and then having to obtain English proficiency tests to gain employment. This testing is not offered on PEI, and costs of going to complete this test is entirely upon the individual. This presents a barrier to graduates of French programs looking to obtain employment here in PEI in certain sectors. I would encourage government to re-examine this policy and its impacts. Regardless of the changes that remain, this new scholarship is a welcome announcement, and I thank the Minister for bringing this forward, and I look forward to seeing future recipients of this scholarship. Thank you, Mr. President.
The honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize and thank all those who are choosing to pursue a nursing career. Nurses play an extremely important role in building a strong and sustainable healthcare system. Many recent graduates from various Canadian registered nurse programs have applied to work here through our province's Nursing Recruitment Incentive Program. As of today, Mr. Speaker, approximately 56 graduate registered nurses have been successfully hired, with a number of additional applications currently being reviewed. Our Nursing Recruitment Incentive Program provides meaningful employment opportunities for recent graduates and helps fill vacant registered nursing positions on PEI. Mr. Speaker, successful applicants receive a one-time financial incentive of $5,000 and guarantee full-time, permanent status with Health PEI for 2 years. The offer through the incentive program also includes vacation and sick leave benefits, health and dental benefits, seniority hours, and pension benefits. Mr. Speaker, our recruitment and retention program make PEI's healthcare system an attractive place to work. Mr. Speaker, nearly half of the applicants are coming from nursing programs out of province and are looking to pursue a career right here in Prince Edward Island. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the team at Recruitment and Retention and Health PEI for all their work behind the scenes to make this possible. Recruitment efforts are always happening in PEI, and I am so pleased as we continue to see more and more progress in this area. Also, Mr. Speaker, last month, 17 new licensed practical nurses were hired, and an additional 17 job interviews will be conducted in the coming weeks. And Mr. Speaker, in 2022, we are expecting 50 LPN graduates from the Holland College program. Mr. Speaker, it is tremendous to see more and more people pursuing nursing careers in PEI and further strengthening our healthcare workforce. I am proud of our recruitment and retention efforts to help build a stronger and more sustainable healthcare system for the people of our province. And Mr. Speaker, I look forward to continuing that momentum. Thank you.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's wonderful to hear about new RNs and LPNs who will be graduating and entering the field with that excitement and passion that new students bring for the incredible caring work that our nurses do in so many areas of our healthcare system. I want to highlight that now that we have these new graduates, we need to ensure that we retain them. And there's so many things that we need to do to help support them as they enter into this field so that we don't have nurses who enter in the field and then burn out within the first couple of years. That happens far too often, and there's a lot we can do to prevent that. So mentorship and support and work-life balance, Mr. Speaker. Work-life balance is something that we should be encouraging and supporting our nurses toward as much as we can. So not all nurses, for example, want to work at 100%, and that's okay. Some want flexibility. Some want to work less than the full hours per week. Many of our nursing graduates are young women, Mr. Speaker, who might find themselves soon caring for young families. So an 80% position rather than 100, for example, might be a better fit. And that is still something that is very valuable for our healthcare system. When we look at childcare, what can we do to ensure there's more access to childcare for our nurses? So on-site or close by our healthcare facilities with extended hours, Mr. Speaker. These are things that this government can do to support our new nurses and nurses who have young children. While I realize that it's important to train new nurses, Mr. Speaker, I also want to highlight that we must retain the nurses we already have. Nurses do an amazing job despite the challenges they face, and I am confident that every person in this room has been affected by the kindness and compassion of nurses, and we need a government that will step up and support them. This means investing both financially and in terms of time. And I hope this government will introduce supports that will allow these new nurses to work and thrive in our field. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Larry Inverness, third party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as a father of a nursing graduate of a few years back, it does give me great pleasure to rise and congratulate all those soon-to-be graduates from the PEI nursing programs, either at Holland College or UPEI or other institutions. From questions today by the leader of the third party to the minister, it would be very obvious that there's numerous amounts of vacancies out there. So once these graduates are finished and get their licenses, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure they shouldn't have much problem finding work, as I would note there's probably about close to 200 vacancies in PEI, and when the minister talks about there's going to be 17 more LPNs and 50 by 2022, how many vacancies will be in 2022 when you're at 200 now, Mr. Speaker? Certainly throughout the healthcare system, however, there seems to be problems, particularly in the nursing profession, Mr. Speaker. And when I see on the vaccine tracker for PEI, that website, we see over 12,000 doses of vaccine in storage, and only about 9,000 Islanders been vaccinated twice, Mr. Speaker. We can see that there's certainly lots of work for those nursing students to maybe get working while they're awaiting their license, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to see such a large influx of Islanders continue to work in their home province, Mr. Speaker, and this certainly will help some of the vacancies in the healthcare services here, Mr. Speaker. But I will say that a lot of the recruiting and stuff, this is nothing new. I was minister, we hired all the graduates we could find. That's a very common thing, Mr. Speaker. While we certainly see a large influx of new talent in the healthcare system, government must now lay the groundwork to retain these workers and professionals going forward. And whether it's retention bonuses or bursaries, increased life-work balances, or expanded scopes of practice opportunities, that's what government must do to ensure that these people stay long-term. So I certainly would like to congratulate all those students who are graduating this spring for their hard work and wish them the very best in their new careers here on Prince Edward Island.
The Honourable Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you could have bought me for $1 here last Friday in this House after the Leader of the Opposition finally came to grips with the reality that we can both protect water in our province at the same time as supporting one of our main economic drivers in our economy, farmers. So, Mr. Speaker, today I want to talk about water and changes we are making. Mr. Speaker, our watershed groups are key community partners. And through consultation with them over the last number of months, there was concern that there might be a number of holding ponds that could be built in advance of the Water Act being proclaimed on June 16th. Today, Mr. Speaker, our government has responded to this concern, and Cabinet endorsed a ministerial order to prevent the construction of multiple low-capacity wells that could act as a high-capacity well. This ministerial order is in effect until June 16th, when the Water Act comes into effect. Mr. Speaker, this isn't to hurt our farming industry. This is to ensure we support them in a way forward that is focused on long-term, sustainable strategy when it comes to water. Our next step will be to create a sustainable irrigation strategy, as the Leader of the Opposition suggested last Friday. But first, I need to take time to correct some of the statements he has made since then. Our department actually has the required data we need to adequately assess and create a strategy for irrigation in this province. And Mr. Speaker, I stay true to my word on this topic from day one. We will use science and data to guide our decision-making when it comes to water in this province. And I'll stay true to my rural roots by standing up for farmers and support them in the continuously evolving challenges they face on a daily basis because of climate change. Farmers are the backbone of many rural communities and the backbone of our economy in our province. On this side of the House, we aren't going to play hot potato with this topic. We're going to roll up our sleeves and tackle this issue, working with my colleague, the Minister of Agriculture and Land, so that we don't continuously kick this problem down the road. Mr. Speaker, I spoke with the Federation of Agriculture and the PEI Potato Board on this ministerial statement, and the Watershed Alliance called for this order. Mr. Speaker, this action today will prevent construction of holding ponds that act like high-capacity wells until the Water Act is enforced. When the Act is enforced, we'll be able to move forward on a well-thought-out, evidence-based irrigation strategy to ensure the agriculture industry in our province is sustainable for years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's certainly a lot to say on that. I have to say, if the minister feels he could have been bought for $1 when he heard those comments, he hasn't been paying attention for the last couple of years in this House. I find this a positive announcement, but I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I cannot believe that the minister has waited until 2 weeks before the Water Act is to take effect in order to make this change, because we've been calling on it for a year, Mr. Speaker, and the last Minister of Environment stood up in this House and said she was not able to make this change. She did not have the power to bring this in, Mr. Speaker. We had brought forward a motion calling for a moratorium on the construction of holding ponds that used multiple low-capacity wells to bypass the moratorium on high-capacity wells, and the former minister said she did not have the ability. So it's fascinating that the new minister does have that ability. I am very happy that we're going to be bringing this into effect. I am sorry that government did not act on this sooner. Groups have been calling on this government to have taken this step since last summer, Mr. Speaker, and I wish if this minister was as passionate about getting it done as he seems to be, that he would have done it last year. I acknowledge he didn't have the ability to, but I wish you could have inspired the last minister to have made this change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third
Not
Party.
possible to do it, huh?
Well, I would like to thank the minister today for this announcement regarding the Water Act. When passed in 2017, the Water Act was designed to put perimeters in place for the protection of island water, while ensuring safe use by industries that depend on water access, such as farming and fishing. This issue has long been debated here in PEI, but in recent years, drought-like conditions have forced us to re-examine this topic. We have heard from provincial environment officials who indicate that we can safely use the island's water resources, provided there are controls and safeguards in place to avoid abuse. Farmers are experiencing drought-like conditions that have never been here before. The Green Party opposition may not understand or appreciate this, but farmers and the agricultural industry employ many islanders and bring great economic benefit to this province. Farmers are great stewards of the environment as they rely on it for their living and the living of future generations. They grow the food we eat and work long, tiresome hours to ensure that food of the utmost quality is there for us islanders. It is a shame that the Green Party opposition has decided to vilify and attack island farmers on this important issue. We all want the environment and water supply to be protected, and the Water Act and its regulations will ensure just that. However, we also need the balance that will be the industrial needs for access to water, provided that the balance can be done in a safe, monitored manner. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of statements. Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table written questions, responses to written questions from the member of Charlottetown Winslow, and I move, seconded by the Minister of Finance, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave the table answer the question taken as notice from Charlottetown Belvedere. Will the Minister commit to making and providing a simple single point of contact for islanders who are in need of housing? Yes. There's the 1-877-368-5770 number and housing@gov.be.ca. And I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table correspondence from ALC regarding the amount of island money fed into VLTs in 2020. And I move, seconded by O'Leary Inverness, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first document I have to table is the Executive Order in Council from the 22nd of December last year, authorising PEI Lotteries Commission to develop, organise, undertake, conduct and manage an enhanced digital platform. And I move, seconded by Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a letter from the Minister of Finance from April 29th last year to Chris Keevil, who is the President and CEO of Atlantic Lottery Commission, saying very clearly that this government will not pursue any online gambling until after the pandemic is over. And I move, seconded by Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a letter from a department member of Finance, clearly stating that gaming priorities from PEI have always been, I quote from the letter, have always been determined by the PEI Lotteries Commission. And I move, seconded by Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
And finally, Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table another letter from the Department of Finance saying that no records are available at all for correspondence between that Department of Government and the PEI Lotteries Commission. And I move, seconded by Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry?
Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table government postings for internal and external health career opportunities, and I move, second by the Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness, that the said document be now read and do lie on the table.
So carried. The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by leave of this House, I beg leave to table current patient registry numbers which show 17,144 Islanders awaiting a family doctor, and I move, second by the Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
So carried. The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table government positions for family physician positions across the province, and I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Charlottetown West Royalty, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
So carried. The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table government positions for ER doctor positions at both the QEH and the PCH, and I move, second by the Honourable Member from Cornwall Meadowbank, that the said document be now read and do lie on the table.
So carried. The Honourable Leader of the third party.
And finally, Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table government postings for various specialist positions at the QEH or the PCH, and I move, second by the Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
So carried. Did I miss anyone? Oh, the Honourable Member from Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By leave of the House, I beg leave to table a written question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning on details surrounding the Department of Education's review on the inclusion model. And I move, seconded by the member from Mermaid Stratford, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
So carried. The Honourable Member from Charlottetown Victoria Park.
Mr. Speaker, by leave of the House, I beg leave to table another written question to the Minister of Education and Lifelong Learning, asking for details on the workforce strategy for the early childcare field, and I move, seconded by the member from Charlottetown Belvedere, that the said document be now received and do lie on the table.
Shall it carry? End of documents? Reports by committees. The Honourable Member from Charlottetown West Royalty.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Standing Committee on Health and Social Development, I beg leave to introduce the second report of the said committee entitled Committee Activities. I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness, that the report be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110-5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I'll be moving the motion for adoption of the report on Wednesday, April 28, 2021.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
The Honourable Member from Monaco Kilmuir and the Government Whip.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, I beg leave to introduce the first report of the said committee entitled Committee Activities. And I move, seconded by the Honourable Member from O'Leary Inverness, that the report be now received and do lie on the table. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 110-5 of the Rules of the Legislative Assembly, I will be moving that the motion for the adoption of the report on Wednesday, April 28, 2021.
Shall it carry? Introduction of government bills. Government motions, orders of the day, government. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure, that the 12th order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 12, an act to amend the Regulated Health Professions Act, Bill number 11, ordered for third reading.
Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure, that the said bill be read a third time.
Shall it carry?
Bill number 11, an act to amend the Regulated Health Professions Act, read a third time.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure, that the said bill do now pass.
Shall it carry? Honorable members, this is a bill introduced by leave of the House, read a first time, read a second time, committed to the Committee of the Whole House, reported, agreed to, without amendment, read a third time, and is now moved that the bill do not pass. All those in favor say yea. Yea. Contrary, nay. Honorable member, bill has passed. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Social Development and Housing, that the first order of the day be now read.
Shall carry.
Order number 1, consideration of the estimates in committee.
The Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Social Development and Housing, that this House do now resolve itself into Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration grant of supply to Her Majesty.
Shall carry. Honorable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker, Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, please.
The House is now in a Committee of the Whole House to consider the grant of supply to Her Majesty. The request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Honourable members, we are on page 124, the Department of Social Development and Housing. The first section, Housing Services, has been read and is presently under debate. I want to remind everyone that each of you have a pair of earbuds in your desk, and if you don't have a pair, there's the clerk will have some extra ones, or you could use your own. So there's a lot of people that are saying they can't hear. So a lot of effort has went into wiring every one of your desks. So if you have trouble hearing, pull out your earbuds or ask the clerk for a set.
Good.
Would you please introduce yourself with your name and title, please?
Yes, Lane Pino, Director of Finance.
Thank you very much and welcome. Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. So, moments like this, I wish we had a kind of a recap like last time on budget estimates so that we could go back to where we were. But I guess I'll just I'll refresh everybody's mind on what I was asking. So. When we left off last time, I had asked the Minister a question about something he said in regards to the outreach centre, and when there were questions asked about the experience of those who were accessing the centre who may have expressed or had expressed some concerns around barriers that might be a problem for properly accessing that service. And the Minister had said that he had visited the centre, which is great, on one Sunday, and that was from that, everybody seemed fine. So, my question was about how, this government is gathering information about the lived experience of people who are accessing programs within social development and housing, and in particular, the outreach center. And the minister then seemed to be answering a very different question quite loudly. So I'm hoping that we can perhaps get an answer to that question. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead. Yep.
So member, I'm not sure if you're familiar with how the outreach center is structured, but there's a working group that oversees the operation of the center, and of course, the Salvation Army is who runs the center, and so the Salvation Army works with the working group, and they set out the strategies to make sure that the center is a safe place, and member, they have a number of policies in place to ensure safety within the center, and there's a whole variety of things there.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. And of course, the minister would realize that every good intention and every policy that is intended to act a certain way still needs to be evaluated regularly to ensure that it is acting, having the impact that it is intended to have, and that all issues are being addressed as effectively as possible. So step one to that is identifying, what the issues and barriers might be for individuals who are accessing that program. And I would think, that should really be, there should be some sort of a process in place beyond just the minister visiting the site on one given Sunday. And I, had listed several reasons why that methodologically is very flawed. So what efforts does the department make to understand the lived experience of individuals who are accessing programs like the Outreach Center? Is there any sort of, surveys or, ongoing qualitative data that is gathered? How do we know what's going on there?
So the working group is made up of many groups, including the CMHA, Blooming House, et cetera, that actually are involved in the center on a day-to-day basis working with the clients. And that's how they get their feedback, just like I said.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
And in what way is feedback from the clients directly reported to the department?
The department sits on the working group as well.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
And in what way is feedback from the clients directly reported to this working group?
So part of asking questions is listening to the answer. And remember, what I said is the working group is made up of organizations that actually work in the outreach center directly with the clients. And so the clients give the feedback. That way they're working directly with them all the time.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. So I would suggest that, in the interest of wanting to make sure that these programs are as effective in achieving their goals as possible, what you are describing is, of course, an important step in listening to workers who are working on the front lines. Absolutely critical, and that's a whole other question of how are you actually, engaging with all workers who are working on the front lines so they can share their experience, and they can also be a key asset in identifying barriers, most certainly. But there needs to be some sort of a way where individuals who are accessing the programs are able to provide feedback on those programs. I mean, so instead of getting defensive, I would suggest that perhaps we take a step back and consider, if there is effective evaluation and data gathering for people who are actually accessing these programs. So these are the people that we're trying to help, and it's a valuable tool to understand, what their experience is, to ensure the programs are working as effectively as possible. So, have you considered any outreach directly to individuals who are accessing the programs?
Yes, so as I said, the working group reaches out directly to the clients. They meet once a month. They work directly with the Salvation Army, and they adjust the policies and other parameters around the outreach center on as needed basis to make sure that the client's needs are met, the outreach center is as safe as it possibly can be. And I don't know if the member ever wants to go to the outreach center, I highly recommend it, and you'll find out that there's quite a great open dialogue with the vast majority of the clients.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke?
So, again, it is, it is good that the minister has visited the outreach center, but it's not sufficient in terms of, gathering information about those who have experienced the program. So I hope that you will take this, recommendation that I'm providing, that, there should be some method for gathering data directly from those with lived experience, for allowing them a space to share their, what are the challenges they might have faced in accessing that program, what's working well. That's also really good to know, right? Because, sometimes these are things that, yes, the staff do have those conversations, but there are limits to what the staff can report back because they're not the ones actually, accessing the program directly. So I will just say that I hope that you look at all different areas where you can gather data to ensure a program is working well, and out of respect for the people who are actually accessing the program, please find a way. And if you would like to discuss ways, of that the department could more effectively gather, qualitative data on the lived experience of individuals who are accessing programs, I would be happy to have that conversation offline. But for now, I just want to flag that, it's a missed opportunity, and it doesn't have to be, we don't have to assume that it's all going to be negative feedback and we should be worried about it. It's an opportunity to learn and grow and make sure the programs are the very best they can be. So that's all, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So remember, that's what we already do. Thank you.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. Just some questions on the outreach center, and recently got an increase of $398,000. Do you know what that increase is for? To the Salvation Army grant?
Yes. Do you want to answer?
So, so that's the annual funding agreement. So it was about $307,000 in fiscal 2021, which represented getting the outreach center started. So the $398 represents the full annual allocation for operating the outreach center.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And you didn't mention a few of the other ones that were partners with the outreach centers: John Howard Society, Upper Room Food Bank. There's some pretty important people. I have heard that it's a little bit, I don't know, loose, I would say. Like there's the services, or the services being offered are a little bit loose. It's almost like everybody's trying really hard, but the problem is a little bit overwhelming. And would the minister like to comment on that? Is he seeing the same thing?
Well, thank you, member. And as a Charlottetown MLA, obviously you understand the outreach center and how it operates. And it really was opened as a pilot only in 2020, and so it's still very, very new. In fact, some of the department staff would say it's in its infancy, and so that's where we're working to tighten things up, and that's why the working group is so important. And you mentioned, you're right, the John Howard Society, the Upper Room Food Bank, some other, and I'm missing some other really key organizations that are part of that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Looking at it, and I just look at the mandate when that was purchased. It was purchased for $1.3 million, I think. Is the scope? I guess you ran a pilot. What information did you gather from that pilot that's assisting you now? And is it on track for what it was set out to do?
Yeah, so the pilot really is ongoing, and this is why it's called a working group, because they're constantly making changes and improvements. And really, I mean, the shelter has two goals. Number one is we want to have clients, get them access to services, so they can to help them, really just to help them improve their life, and also provide a warm, dry, safe place. Those are the two main goals, and it's that access to services piece and helping them improve that. We're constantly working to improve that. Yeah.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
So when is the pilot going to be completed? How long is the pilot is it an ongoing pilot? Pilots are usually measured so we can get data and then we can improve. I don't know how long that's gonna last for. Like, is there an end date?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure if we actually set an official end date for the pilot. We believe in the department, and I believe as minister, that it is providing a very much needed service. I think if you talk to, for example, officials from the city of Charlottetown, they would agree. I've met with the mayor, met with some councillors. So, I mean, our next step, as I mentioned the other day, is we're looking for a more permanent location for it. We know the current location isn't ideal. And I would say once we reach our final destination, and at that point, we would probably look at ending the pilot. I mean, yeah, that's how I would put it. We're going to remain in the pilot phase until we really feel like we've got it to a place where it needs to be long term.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And this problem is growing in Charlottetown. I mean, just like you, Minister, I was down and I spent quite a bit of time in the center and I enjoyed it, and the staff are just working incredibly hard, but they were working hard and they were doing everything and anything under the sun. I'm worried about, I'll tell you the truth, I'm worried about how government's supporting this project.
Okay.
I'm just worried that the supports aren't there that these important islanders need, because it's too loose. We have a pilot that we don't know when it's going to end. I don't know if we can get the data from that. So I guess my question is, Minister, do you have a signed lease with the Curling Club?
Yes, we do.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
You talked about the outreach center moving. Is that where it's moving to?
It's one location that's being considered.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
If the lease is signed by the Department of Social Development, would one think, do you have any other leases with buildings downtown in Charlottetown?
That's, I don't know. No, we probably own other property though. I can get back to you with that. I'd like to just verify
so,
that.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Have you consulted, let's say that the outreach center is going to move to the Curling Club? Have you consulted with the residents in that area, city council? Is that something that you're ongoing? If that building is moving, there needs to be a consultation piece. Have you started in that?
No, member, and we're just at the very beginning of the process, you know. And as I mentioned, I have met with the mayor and one councillor and a planning authority, and I've also met with the councillor for that ward, and they've assured me in no uncertain terms that they would have issues with an outreach centre moving to that location, and so we've got work to do, without a doubt.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And I'm worried about the gaps. I'm worried about if that moves. And I've talked to the Minister of Health about this, and you know how important the services that Deacon House provide are. If that moves, are you looking at potentially moving the services from Deacon House into the outreach center, the current existing outreach center?
So we're working closely with the Department of Health and Wellness to support them with the Deacon House, and we want to move it to a place that is appropriate for those clients that need that service. And I think that sometimes the services that Deacon House provides right now are a little misunderstood. I mean, the Minister of Health could speak to it a little better, but my understanding is they're clients that really have extreme needs when it comes to mental health and addictions.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And those clients are your clients through the support you provide through the Salvation Army. So they're very much, they use the outreach center. Is social development looking at taking over the services that are done by the Department of Health and Wellness?
Well, yeah, we're working with Department of Health and Wellness right now, and I think everything's on the table. As you mentioned, those services do align well with our department, so I would say that's a consideration for sure.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
And I appreciate the minister answering these questions. These are tough questions. These are tough questions for a new minister. Just talking about harm reduction for a second. Is the outreach center now set up or moving towards a harm reduction model?
That is a very good question. I probably can't answer that unless my stranger wants to chip in. How about I get back to you on that one?
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Do you know if the clients at the facility, they have substance abuse problems, and it's unfortunate. We're all trying to help them out with that, but along the way they end up having to use substance abuse. They take drugs at different times when they're down there, when they're in that realm. Do you know? And is this a problem for you as a minister? Do you know anything about that situation?
And this is one of the key challenges for sure. I mean, it's I believe that the correct term is it would be, you know, like a wet center. In other words, you're allowed to go there if you're under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I think it's very important to note that that no one is allowed to use alcohol or other drugs while they're on the premises. And there are measures that are put in place by the Salvation Army, working with the working group to ensure that doesn't happen, and they're very, very diligent about that, though.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
And at this point, I'm worried about dirty needles. I'm worried about there's no safe injection site in Prince Edward Island. We know this is happening. The boxes are full there. The safety boxes are full there. I'm worried about taking care, and that's what harm reduction is about, trying to, you know, mitigate and look at some of the behaviors and make sure that they're in a safe environment. And I'm just that's a major one of my concerns. Do you know if that center, the outreach center, is accessible to all?
So, just speaking to your first point about a safe injection site, I mean, that is something Department of Health and Wellness is taking the lead on, but obviously, as you mentioned before, there are really a lot of our clients that are involved, and so we're working closely with them. That's one of the goals with our administration, is to work across departments to solve these really tough issues. Now, sorry, your next question was again?
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Well, my next question, but just getting back to that, is I'm worried both about the Minister of Health, because he didn't answer my questions about some of these things, and yourself not answer. But my question was, is it accessible? Is the outreach center accessible for people with disabilities, or if you're in a
okay.
Yeah.
I would say the answer is probably no, not fully accessible for sure. This is one of the challenges we have. This is why we're looking for a permanent location. This is one reason why it's not ideal. I can verify that information, but just, I mean, you've been there, you've seen it. I think it's pretty safe to say it's probably not fully accessible.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
And I'll pass the floor in a little bit. There's just don't want to. We've had some issues with accessibility, with some discrimination issues around different avenues and areas with Bedford McDonald House as well. Do you know what are the quality indicators that the Salvation Army is required to meet to provide the services? What are the quality indicators?
You know, remember, I'd have to go and bring that back. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
And then these are concerning things, and I mean, it's the lack of information back, the lack of the matrix around accountability, that we're in a pilot. It's concerning, and this is an important file, and I know the staff are working hard, and I know that, but we can't let this one get out of control, is the way I feel. So that's my last question for now. Thank you, Chair. I'll pass the floor.
Charlottetown Brighton?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to thank the Minister for the direct help you gave me dealing with a constituent that has been waiting for far too long for his rental voucher. In this case, up to I think close to 2 months, not necessarily all because of your department, because he has some issues being reachable as well. But it brings up the question, what kind of standard do you have in terms of providing help, and this is often to people that get in the situation and they literally don't have the money for next week to eat. What's your standard for reacting and providing help to people who needs it?
So obviously the professionals within the Department of Social Development and Housing work with clients day in, day out, and often there's lots of various challenges the clients are facing. I mean, just recently, I think one of your colleagues was trying to get us in touch with one of their constituents who didn't have a phone, right?
Yep.
And so it was really difficult for them to keep in contact. I think it's safe to say that I don't know if there's any particular service level agreement, of an amount of time, and I can look for that. But they try to get back as soon as possible, and our goal is to help Islanders, right? These folks that work in social development and housing on the front lines, I mean, they're passionate about helping people. That's why they chose the careers they did, and so they want to get back to people to solve their problem, so that they're not put in positions like, unfortunately, your constituent was.
Charlottetown Brighton?
No, I appreciate that they want to help, and so I don't have the details about your department where the holdup is, but I note that other departments like innovation was able to spit out money very fast. We needed for COVID last year, so it can happen within government. So the millions you spent on vouchers are obviously critical to keep people in good housing, but there's some that think, including myself, that vouchers is only a short-term solution. To what extent are you looking at what the long-term answer should be for that?
Yes. So I'm not sure if I would characterize a mobile rental voucher as entirely a short-term solution. I mean, it's a way to help Islanders who have found their own place to live and meet a certain threshold of income, like they're below a certain threshold of income, be able to live there. I have some ideas about more long-term rental subsidies. I know this is a criticism that's come from the opposition a lot, and I'd be interested in hearing any ideas you have. I mean, it'd be along the lines of, government potentially, owning more housing within some of the critical areas like downtown Charlottetown. But there's a lot. That's a loaded thing to say. There's a lot to consider when you do that. But I'm not sure there's a magic bullet here. We want to make sure people have a safe housing that's affordable. So if they're paying more than 30% of their income, I believe, in fact, we use 25% of their income when it comes to mobile rental vouchers, then we want to make up that difference. We do have a cap as to the maximum amount of rent we would pay based on the size of the unit, but yeah.
Okay. Charlottetown Brighton?
I'm good, yeah.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on a couple of things regarding the outreach centre, the original pilot and then the new location, or this is now the third location, given that there was original one on Longworth, Euston, then to Birchwood School, and now at the current location. Can you just talk about how the budget, or how did you determine the budget to provide the funding that's being allocated for that with the contract with the Salvation Army? Like how did that budget get determined?
Do you want to take this one?
Sure. So as part of negotiating the contract, Salvation Army provided us with a proposal, which included staffing, administrative overhead, and so on to operate the facility, and that's what the contract is based on.
Okay.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you, Chair. Where is the cost for the lease for the building and the operating cost for the building itself covered? Is that part of this contract as well, or is that coming out of a different budget line?
So the building is owned by the department, by government. So the operational costs with the direct operational costs with respect to the facility are covered by the department.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
And is that property part of the PEI Housing Corporation, or is it directly owned, managed by the department?
It's part of the Housing Corporation.
Okay, so it would be under the assets and management of the Housing Corporation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. Were there any other proposals submitted for the management of the outreach centre other than that from the Salvation Army?
No, when there was, in the early discussions with regards to the outreach center, many community partner organizations were brought together to discuss the next steps in terms of moving it forward. And it was Salvation Army that stepped up and took it to the next step in terms of providing a proposal and based on their experience that they have at other centers across the country.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. What are the terms and conditions on that contract in terms of, like, is it a multi-year recurring contract? Or are there certain conditions or terms that need to be met for the contract to be renewed on an annual basis?
So so it's a 3-year agreement, and part of that is there is a reporting component to that in terms of annual reporting, and of course the accountability through the working group is also part of the contract in terms of managing the day-to-day operations, but there's also reporting in terms of statistics that are provided annually as part of the agreement.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the statistics, does that mean that you're tracking the number of clients that are being served, you know, with the various services through that space? Like, what kind of things are we requiring from the reporting perspective for this contract?
I mean, if you like, we can bring back some more details around that. I don't know, Elaine, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, no, we do have some information in terms of clients served that we can look to bring back.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. You know, and to my colleague's point previously, you know, especially when we're dealing with something which has a social service, and this has been raised by the Auditor General and other spaces as well, that it's important that we're not only tracking bums in seats, you know, the numbers, but also sort of, you know, like how many of those clients are returning clients, how many clients are being referred on to other services, you know, it's the experience of the services being provided. So is that some of the consideration of the reporting that's required for the contract?
I mean, I tend to agree with you, member, and let's just, I'd like to get that information and bring it back to you so you know exactly what we are tracking.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
It might be something to consider that those reports are made available to the legislature as part of the ongoing reporting process of the delivery of this critical community service.
Well, that's something I'll take under advisement.
Yeah, given confidentiality and other pieces,
Yeah.
but certainly, you know, obviously when we have a sole service contract, I understand the complexities of contracting, especially for something like this, which is, you know, very much about skill set, but there also have been concerns raised about some of the services because of it being the Salvation Army, and we have discussed those at length in committee. But I would like to raise specific questions regarding this, and that is the provision of adequate and appropriate services for members of the LGBTQ community, particularly because we have had reports of complaints for clients who are transgender, who do not feel that they were treated with dignity and respect. Additionally, ensuring the requirements that all members of the community are served appropriately, including Indigenous members of the community and people who are non-denominational, that is, people who are not members of the Christian Church. Can you confirm that those are requirements of this provision of this contract?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, the working group is a key. It is the advisory group for the day-to-day operations of the Outreach Center, and the Peers Alliance does sit on that working group as a partner and member. And I believe the Mi'kmaq Confederacy does as well, although right now their seat is there. It's not always filled, so there's an invitation for them to be there whenever they would like to.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think there are some challenges always with power dynamics when it comes to organizations that receive government funding, who are then also providing work as members of an advisory committee or a working group, and where the delivery partner, in this case the contracted service provider, has the contract to provide that service. So my question isn't just about, I appreciate the input of the working group, but the responsibility for that contract and the reported outcomes are with the service provider, which is the Salvation Army. We already have an investigation that's had to be conducted against some very serious complaints of racism and discrimination, and I am following up on that. We still haven't seen that report yet, and I understand, Minister, you're going to table it, but this is a significant contract that is being delivered sole source to a service provider where there have been serious questions raised about the ability of that provider to provide fair and equitable service to all members of the community, including people who are not Christian, so non-denominational service, those in the Indigenous community, and the LGBTQ community. Do you have any response regarding that being a serious consideration?
As you mentioned, I mean, it's really key to have all the various different groups represented on within the working group itself, right? But and as we already committed, we're going to bring back to you the different metrics and reporting requirements that the Salvation Army has. And yeah, apologies for not tabling that report yet. It's coming very, very soon. I wish I could have done it today. But I think when you read that report, you know, I was satisfied that in fact those allegations didn't hold water.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I'm happy to hear that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the report as well. There are, however, serious and ongoing concerns among the community, and it's something that we need to be continually mindful about, that if individuals have expressed that they don't feel comfortable going to receive a service through an organization when that's the only place where that service can be provided, then where else are they supposed to go? We also, obviously we also have the same issue where if there's a space where people don't feel safe, physically safe, for example, then it's less likely that women would go there than men, for example. In addition to that, we don't have any provision for youth. And so, where we have people who are in our community who are in need from all of these different groups. And, as we've heard from other members on the floor, if people express concern, it's our responsibility to follow up on that. It doesn't mean that those are unfounded. It also doesn't mean that they're all true. It just means that it is our responsibility, especially when we only have one provider in the community. There's nowhere else to go.
So let me say, I mean, we take that responsibility very, very seriously. We want to hear from people if they have concerns, and we will follow up on that. And I mean, the working group, as I mentioned before, is one key place for any of those community organizations, if they have concerns, to bring them forward. But remember, I mean, if you have individuals who are coming to you and you think it's appropriate for them to meet with the department, we'd be happy to do that. I mean, I think when it comes to the different groups, whether it be, men or women or Indigenous or LGBTQ+ or youth, the working group, I believe, is trying to accommodate all those groups. And if there are concerns, please bring them forward. We want to know what they are. We want to know who's bringing them forward. We're here to serve. As I mentioned before, I think the Outreach Centers is serving a real key, important need in the community. I mean, you're a Charlottetown MLA, and maybe you can tell me that. I think this started in January 2020, and here we are, approaching a year and a half later. And I think, I think we had 76 people, unique individuals, access the Outreach Center over the last month. I don't know, we want to address these concerns, so if you can bring them forward, if you can point us to who to talk to, we definitely we take them very seriously, right? So, yeah, the working group is there, made up of people from all these different organizations, whether it be John Howard, whether it be Peers Alliance, CMHA, and they're bringing feedback. They meet on a monthly basis. We're constantly improving. We're addressing issues. I don't know what else to tell you, remember?
Charlottetown Belvedere.
It's very difficult for people in the community who are the least advantaged, who have absolutely no, they're invisible. I mean, remember, this is the same group of people where there were over 50 people who were living and sharing what they had in a culvert. And when that was filled in by the city, then people talked about, well, gosh, where did these people come from? Where did they go? Those are people who were not necessarily going to the outreach center, either because they were not able to be dry, or because they weren't welcome, or because they'd been banned, or because they didn't feel safe there, or whatever reason, or maybe they did go both places. But they're talking about, this is not one or two people, this is an entire population who have absolutely no leverage anywhere. When there are beds at the outreach center that are not being used for whatever reason, but the Smith Lodge has up to 20 beds, but there's only, please let me finish, there's only a certain number of those that are currently in use. I think you said yesterday or the other day 5 or 6 or 6 or 7 or whatever, but there's up to 20 beds available. But every night there are more people that need places to stay than there are beds that are open and available. And so instead people are having to call around and find places for people to stay, including couches. And sometimes you don't find enough places for people to stay. I don't know if I could go to the lady that sleeps in the bank lobby around the corner from my house and ask her if she'd be comfortable coming in with me to have a meeting with you.
Yeah,
she's terrified.
So there's
she's
lots.
Afraid, and she's got nowhere to go. And I have no way to help her. Me taking her to come and meet you isn't going to change her life.
So as the member from Tyne Valley would say, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I mean, you said that they wouldn't go there because they're not dry. They don't have to be dry to go there, for one.
They do. The outreach center requires people to be dry.
They do not have to be dry. They do not have to be dry. It is a wet facility. It is a wet facility. Who said it earlier?
You did.
I did not say. It's a wet facility. That's what I said earlier. Okay. And what that means is, if they're using drugs or alcohol, they can go there under the influence. They cannot use while they're on the property. That is absolutely not true. But this, the member from Charlottetown West Royalty brought up that point, and it's a good one. If they're not allowed to use on the property, but allowed to go there if they're under an influence, so where are they using? Mm-hmm. And this is why we're in discussions about a safe injection site, for example. But the other thing is, Bedford House and Deacon House are not full. Okay, first of all, so there are places for people to go. If there's someone sleeping in the bank lobby, I'd encourage you to call the emergency shelter line. They don't have to meet with the minister. We can get them help right away. We want to make sure, our goal is to make sure nobody is sleeping on the street on any night, and we have the resources there to make that happen. So if you see somebody that's sleeping on the street and you feel comfortable helping them, I mean, you can call us too, and we will reach out to them. I mean, we have places for them to go. We have resources to make that happen. Nobody should be sleeping on the street, and we make sure they don't. What else did you say?
A lot.
Yeah. So I mean, I think a lot of the assumptions you're making. We may have services within the department that'll help out. Well, it sounds like you are.
No, I'm not.
Honorable members, the promoter has the floor.
So.
Continue.
Yeah, so some of the assumptions you're making, I want to make sure that we get you the facts about the programs that we offer and how we do have the right groups involved, I believe, so that we can represent all the various people that use the center to make sure that nobody's sleeping on the street, and most importantly, people get access to the services they need. That's really the goal, member. And I'm looking forward. I think if we work together on this one. I mean, you're the local MLA, one of them, right down in Charlottetown here. So we want to make sure that it's your constituents to have the services they need. So
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I think my constituents would be horrified to hear that you're talking about their experiences as assumptions. There were constituents in everybody's districts that experienced this. Just the fact that I happen to have a bank lobby in mine where somebody sleeps doesn't mean that that's the only place that happens. And so what happened for that woman was that somebody called the police on her, and the police came and took her away before anybody could get her help. And I don't know where she's gone now. I'll talk to her the next time I see her, but that's generally what happens is the members of the public will call the police first, especially if it's a woman of color, because then they'll say, well, I was afraid she was going to rob me, which is what I heard from somebody in this bank lobby. So we don't have a caring, loving community for people who don't fit. And it's really difficult when you know that the centre is there, and absolutely the people that can go to the centre, Minister, it's better than nothing. And it has really helped some people. I have talked to a lot of people who have been able to get access to services, and it has helped them get on a path, if not to recovery, then at least to some form of wellness. And that's huge. And every person we can make that happen for is a huge victory. But it does not discount the fact that every day people aren't moving forward. And I don't know how many is enough, and I know again, it's not a conversation I think anybody wants to be having. It's like the same conversation about how many people is it okay to be poor. Yeah. But when we don't have a suite of services available, people are going to fall through. So if I have somebody who has been banned from the outreach centre because they're violent, where do they go? Except somewhere like a culvert. If I have somebody who is not allowed to go to Deacon House because they have a fight with somebody else who's also at Deacon House, where are they supposed to go?
Okay. So, Chair, mind if I jump in here? So, let me reiterate it. I mean, it's the responsibility of all of us in the South, me, you, every MLA, if there's people in their district that need help, the help, that's what I'm trying to say, the help is there. I mean, that emergency shelter line, we will find a place. If Deacon House is full, if they've had a fight, I mean, there have been people who haven't been accepted anywhere, who burnt every bridge, but we find a spot for them to stay the night. And that's the point I'm trying to get across. And our goal is exactly that. So there's the acute need of the immediate, okay, how can we help this person so they're not sleeping on the street or getting into worse trouble even? And then the long-term need is how do we connect them with the services they need? Because like you say, I mean, people need these services. We need to help them really solve the root of their problems. I mean, homelessness is a symptom of a deeper cause, right? And that's exactly what the goals of this outreach center are. Remember, they're the two of them. One is warm, safe, secure. The second one is connect with services to really help them in the long term. And are we there yet? Do we have a perfect solution? No. I'm glad to hear you say that. You've heard that it has helped people out. That's what we're hearing all the time. But the working group meets once a month, and really we're adding to the services. We're improving the services because that is the goal. We want to help Islanders, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. But make sure you use the emergency shelter line. And we will help people. That's what we're there for.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. Very familiar with the emergency service line. Call it probably 4 or 5 times a week, Minister, and sometimes it doesn't get answered. Sometimes there's nothing somebody can do. Sometimes the answer is no. You need to be clear. Just because we have an emergency line doesn't mean that we can actually help everybody. Minister, could you advise how many individuals we're housing in motels or hotels in addition to the official emergency shelter spaces that we have?
So first let me say, if the emergency shelter line is, in my mind, is supposed to be a 24/7 service, it should always be answered. And what my department tells me is no one is ever turned away. So that is an issue. We will solve that. I want to work with you to solve that. Secondly, in terms of the number of people that we house in places other than our shelters, I think that's what you're asking. Those are stats I believe we have. Do you have access to them right now, Lane?
I have the total number of beds roughly, and it's about 19.
Okay.
Sorry, that was 19, right?
19.
19.
Yeah.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you. When will we get the data from the John Howard Society survey of homelessness? Do we have any idea? Because I know the last time we did that survey, there were 96 individuals identified as a snapshot at any given time. Do you know when we're going to get the data from the current survey?
Yes. So that I believe that's just winding up right now. You know what? Let me get that back. I want to get the information correct for you. But I believe that survey is just ending, and we'll have the data very, very soon. I will verify that and get back to you.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you. So we have 19 spaces in motels and hotels. We have 6 or 7 beds available at Smith Lodge. We have 8 beds at Bedford McDonald House, and we have 8 beds at Blooming House. Is that correct? Plus another 12 at Deakin?
No, I think we have 9. Actually, I did confirm that there's 9 at Smith Lodge.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, let me turn to the right page in the book with all these stats here. 9 at Smith Lodge, 6 at Deakin House, 10 at Bedford McDonald House, and then we have 10, the way we term it, scattered sites. At Blooming House, we have the 8 beds. At the Chief Mary Bernard Memorial Women's Shelter, there are 5. Anderson House, there are 8 beds. And then
There's scattered sites for 10.
we have scattered sites as well. In Summerside, looks like 9. And yeah. And you know what, member, let me just get this to you so you don't have to try and piece together my eyeing and umming.
Okay.
And we'll get a good summary to you and we can table that.
Thank you.
Charlottetown Belvedere?
Thank you. Doing the math in my head. And obviously Anderson House is slightly separate because that is not for people who are experiencing temporary homelessness through mental health and addictions, but people who are fleeing domestic violence. So a different... And so Blooming House may have a mix, so it is also a very mixed clientele because it's the only women's shelter. But looking at that, obviously we've got sort of 40 plus beds that are predominantly for men, or depending on the mix that's in the 19 beds that are in motels and hotels. So about 58 beds in the Charlottetown and area, plus then about 10 in Summerside is what I'm hearing. Oh, and 5 at Lennox.
Yeah, 5 at Lennox, yes.
Okay. So if you have 76 clients at any given time at the outreach center, and we had 96 people identified as homeless a few years ago, how is 50 odd beds going to work to make sure everybody has a place? How does that work?
So I just want to reiterate again, this is an extremely crucial point, and I'm not sure it's one that members across the House realize that if someone is homeless, and this means if they're couch surfing, if they don't have a place to stay for one night, or they're waiting for an apartment to open up, we will take care of all homelessness. If it's a woman and her children that are trying to get away from an abusive relationship, we will help them. We will find a place for them to stay. And we're always working to improve on that. Obviously, a woman's shelter is a better place for a woman who's trying to get away from abusive relationship than staying in a hotel, and well, in some cases. But the key point I'm trying to make here is if someone needs a place to stay and they're homeless, we will find a place for them to stay. So your numbers, 50 permanent and 96 last year and 76 that are at the outreach center. You can try and piece together and say, who goes where or what. But the point is, we're going to find a place for all of them to stay, and we're continuing to work. I mean, working in Summerside with the Boys and Girls Club in partnership with Lifehouse, or I should say Lifehouse partnership with Boys and Girls Club. They're launching a new women's shelter, and it's under a supporting families program, I believe. So again, it's surrounding people with services, it's providing short-term help and long-term help, and that's where we want to go. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. I mean, the numbers are still, there's still a really big gap there between the number of beds that we have available and what sounds like the need. How are you filling that additional need? Like, where are they going?
So.
And where's the budget for that? Because if it's not in shelter space, and so you're already telling me that we've got 19 odd beds in motels and hotels, where does that show up in your budget line?
Okay, and maybe I'll ask Lane to point that out, exactly where it is in the budget line, but it's there, and we'll accommodate them. I mean, if it has to be a hotel or a motel, those sorts of places. And this is one reason why I'm saying this here today, all of us representing our constituents, because there are people who are not coming to us. And you alluded to that as well, these people in your constituency that are sleeping, in the next to the ATM. I don't know why, but we need to help connect them with these services because we can find a place to stay. So, we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to close that gap as needed.
Member, do you have many more questions on this thread?
I just have one other question on this thread, and then we can come back.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess the other question is obviously you're spending a lot of money on continuing to provide temporary and emergency shelter. Where is the money for the next step for that transitional housing that helps people at least have somewhere stable? Because a harm reduction approach to housing, and one it recognizes that people can't get well unless they have somewhere safe to sleep. And a shelter is not somewhere safe to sleep. It's somewhere that literally, it's shelter. It's not a home. So a housing first approach combined with a harm reduction approach is how you actually help people get well. And the people that I've talked to who were success stories are success stories because they got out of the shelter and they got into an apartment. So where's the funding for that?
Okay, so I wanted to confirm that for the member from Charlottetown West Royalty that we do use a behavior-based harm reduction model, as the member was mentioned. Pardon me. Excuse me. All choked up here. I was hoping to use that only for the really, really hard questions.
Okay.
But pardon me. So maybe we'll go over to Lane here. Maybe you can talk about where that money is within the budget lines.
So for, I guess, looking at Bedford and McDonald House there is capacity, as we noted, for up to 20 beds. Only 10 are being used right now. So once the outreach center is, once we get closer to establishing a longer term or permanent location for that, we look at further expanding Bedford House as a potential next phase to utilize the capacity there.
And I did want to add to that as you mentioned, I mean, shelters are filling an acute need.
Yeah.
Whereas we want to get people long-term help. And I mean, transitional housing is one piece, for example, that we're expanding. And I wanted to, again, just talk about Lennon Recovery House and the work they're doing. They're bringing people and transitioning them from addiction recovery out into the regular life, I guess we'll call it. But I know they're also looking forward as well and saying, how can we do some sort of actual transitional housing outside themselves? So there are groups like that are continuing to work, and we're supporting them because we know that's how we get people long-term help and long-term success.
Charlottetown Belvedere, I'll come back to you again. Okay. O'Leary Inverness.
Yeah, Minister, I had a few questions, but maybe just on the thread that was mentioned there a little bit more. You mentioned Chief Mary Bernard Women's Shelter in Lennox Island there, and there's 5 beds there. So how are those 5 beds allocated by the province, or are they in combination with the reserve there, or how's that? What's the funding arrangement on those?
Okay, so the Lennox Island First Nation completely administers the Mary Bernard Memorial Women's Shelter. They look after everything, and And they've been just fantastic to the province by allowing non-Indigenous women to stay there as well. And we're currently in negotiations with them. They have asked us for some funding, and we're working that out.
O'Leary and Vanessa.
So do you pay like a lump sum per year for the 5 beds, or is it based on not vacancies, occupancy, I should say, for the 5 beds?
Well, these are exactly the sort of things we're talking about in our negotiations.
O'Leary and Vanessa.
Okay, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask the question. At one time, there was West Prince Family Violence Prevention had a house in O'Leary. I think it was called Rainbow House. Does that still exist? Is there people there?
Well, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I don't know the answer to that.
O'Leary and Vanessa.
Obviously, I'd asked you a few questions in the legislature here just regarding the seniors home repair programs, the senior safe at home, and the PEI home renovation program. And I'm assuming in the budget here that there's a $200,000 increase to that program for this fiscal year.
It's $678,000
for this year.
For the 3 programs: the home repair, senior safe at home, and seniors home repair.
Okay,
across the 3.
For this year, then, 600
Yes.
in total. Okay.
Yes.
So one of the issues I'd mentioned, like one of the issues is getting quotes is a big challenge, and also that the quotes are still valid. You had mentioned that you would give me some sort of a sense of the approval times for applications once they're received. And I want to emphasize that I do find that I appreciate that the department is working with the Office of Energy Efficiency, and it seems like when an application comes in, it gets transferred around to make sure that each program, is that not the case?
Yes. So on your first question, what we're doing is we're still compiling those stats for you.
Okay.
I want to break it down by program. You know, PEI home renovation, senior safe at home, seniors home repair, and get some of those stats to make sure we get it right. Based on preliminary numbers, I think there is room for improvement there. So thank you for pointing that out. The second piece, sorry, what was your second question?
Well, my understanding is that when an application comes in, say the PEI home renovation program or the seniors home repair, they may say that may be better suited through the Office of Energy Efficiency, and then they ask the Office of Energy Efficiency to see what resources they would have. The problem, which I think may be a good thing, but the problem I'm having is that it also causes a delay in getting an approval on that part of the program. Is that the case? And
I think it's a good point you make. I'm still digging into it as the new minister, as the member from Resworthy said. But, I mean, we are going across multiple departments, and it's the Home Comfort Program, I believe, is the one you're referring to with Efficiency PEI. And our goal is to make it as streamlined as possible for people who are applying, in particular seniors, right? We need to make it as easy as possible for them to get the maximum amount of help that they're entitled to.
O'Leary and Vanessa.
You had mentioned when I was asking you some questions earlier just around the Home Builders Association and what kind of feedback you were getting on some of the challenges that they were having on building materials. Did you get any feedback from them on how far the $600,000 is really going to go in the scheme of, will it actually buy you more stuff and repairs, or is it we're just simply keeping up with the cost of building supplies, or in my case, I'm saying you're not?
So my colleague from the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture, I know has a really good handle on some of the increases in building material costs, and I believe it's in the 30% range or so. But of course, when it comes to the home renovation programs, it's not all about materials as well. I think, again, based on our preliminary analysis, it might be more about the timing and finding the people to do the work. So we're still digging into that. I wish I could give you some better answers about whether that $600,000 is going to go far enough. But because you raised the issue, and thank you for that. And it was something on my list anyhow. But we're digging into it.
Right.
O'Leary and Vanessa.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying what I've seen is, we've seen plywood prices at least double. We've seen 2x4s, building materials, so that would be in the doubling capacity, maybe tripling, maybe an example. I've been told electrical issues around wiring, that's gone up about 50%. And like I say, I'm just finding my constituents are saying that they're either don't have enough money to go around to put in their portion of the money into the project, and it's going to leave a lot of people, I think, in a very precarious situation, which I think is going to put more pressure on your issues around seniors housing. I had a meeting last night, and I was talking to one of the constituents, a senior who has his name on the seniors housing list, and he'd like to sell his house. He's kind of in a situation that needs some repairs, and he got no place to go. He's in a kind of a quandary to a certain degree. Now he's going to hang in there and hope things will improve. But do you see the potential problems that are going to exist here if we don't sort of address this, making sure that there's enough resources? So when I go back to $600,000 for Prince Edward Island for all of those programs, I just don't see where it's going to buy a whole lot of materials to get people the basic needs that they would require.
No, and as I said during question period, it is a good point. If we need to increase the amounts, we will. We're doing the analysis on that to see how much we would have to increase them. And I don't believe we have any plans to change the budget document right now from 600,000. But if we have to do it after the budget is passed, I have no problems going to a special warrant to get the extra funds that are needed, and we will do that as necessary.
Well, that is reassuring. I guess my thinking would have been to try to be prepared for the budget document, even though it might be printed. We could have made an amendment to if there's a number you felt. Now, another question I'm getting into, and I've been working with some developers in my area to build some senior housing units or low-income housing units, and there's been a number of have happened in O'Leary recently. We made the announcement, you guys got them done. But in the end of the day, I believe there was some sort of arrangement, it's like 40-some thousand per unit, and but once again, building materials have changed that dynamic significantly. Are you running into developers sort of backing away that program isn't worthwhile in taking on that initiative?
So, and again, that's something I mentioned in my response to question period. It's something we're going to look at. We've met, as the minister, I've met with a few developers, and none of them have asked for more per se right now, but it's something I flagged with the department, and the department's looking at. If we have to increase that, again, we will, because our goal is to take those 50 units of affordable development housing program and get them out there and build housing, because we know we need it on the island.
O'Leary Inverness.
Now, I know in O'Leary, like I said before, like we made some out there, all those units were filled almost immediately. And now I'm getting in a unique situation as an MLA. I've never had this happen before, but I've had families contact me. They have no place to go. They've been kind of given notice that the landlord's going to sell the property and things of that nature. And they're asking me, do you know of any places around and what the process is? So they get their name on the application list. I've tried to identify some potential homes that may be summer residents, that maybe somebody might want to rent them out and things of that nature. But it's getting to be a concern. And then, like I say, the senior that mentioned, he's on a list trying to find a place to go. It's getting concerning. Do you get the sense that it's getting worse across the island? And are there vacant affordable housing units in other jurisdictions? I know O'Leary, there's none, but I don't know, is there places in Rustico? Is there other places that are not filled?
I would say that 2 years into our administration's mandate, we're still playing catch up. I think for many years we kind of got behind the curve in terms of housing, and for various reasons, of course, we've seen the need go up. This is why it's critical we get more units built. I would unfortunately say that your experience with your constituents is probably not unique.
Okay.
I wish I could say otherwise, but we are making good progress. To give some credit to the previous administration, there were 321 new units that were approved prior to April 2019. Yes, and since then we've approved an additional 142. So there's 463 units now. We're continuing to add to that, and to tell you the truth, these are just approved ones. So we have the additional 50 coming this year. We're adding on to that for Affordable Housing Development Plan, plus We have some other PEI Housing Corporation units that are being added for this year. Do you have that number handy?
So for the PEI Housing Corp, there's 32 units that are going to be completed in this fiscal year, and then for projects already in motion, there's another 92 that's going to be completed on the other side of this fiscal year.
O'Leary and Verness.
So based on what is already open now, are there any vacancies anywhere in Prince Edward Island? Like, is there a community we could identify that says there's some vacancies here, or they're not all full? And all I'm trying to get at is that in O'Leary's case, we have none at the moment. And like I say, I'm getting these kinds of issues, but are there other communities that maybe these people, like I'm going to say Tyne Valley might be an example, but is there other places within the region that there may be some vacancies, both seniors and low income, that are housed, that are owned by the province or managed by the province?
You know what, let me get back to you on that one. I don't want to misspeak and make sure I don't talk about vacancies where there are some. My gut feel is though that when it comes to social housing, you know, we're full essentially.
Yeah.
But let me just verify that for you.
O'Leary and Verness.
And to try to wrap up, so what's your process to decide where you're funding? So if I said to you in O'Leary's case that we don't have any vacancies, do you have some sort of an assessment to verify that and what the demand might be in that particular community to see if we can get some funding to try to create a developer to put some units there?
Yeah, yes, and again, this is a message we're trying to get out, is we have these housing registries, one for family, one for seniors. If you have families, they have to meet a threshold of income. They have to be below that threshold to qualify. But if you have families that are in need of housing, please have them sign up on the housing registry. They may even be a senior that's in their own house right now that's looking to move out and sell that property, but they can still be on the registry. And that's how we gauge the demand. And so if we looked at O'Leary and said, you know, we have 13 families on the registry, we'd say, okay, let's make sure we partner with a developer, and we'll work with the local MLA to put you know, a 12-unit building in there, and you know, by the terms of the Affordable Housing Development Plan, we could fund that $45,000 per door up to 6 of those units.
Right.
So O'Leary and Verness.
So on that, is that registry any different than when a senior goes into the Access Center in O'Leary and gets an application for seniors housing? Is that the same thing? Just to be clear, I guess, or is the housing registry a little separate from that?
Yeah, so it's the same registry, and in particular for seniors. I mean, we on the back end, we look at our social housing as well as our Affordable Housing Development Plan, our PEI Housing Corporation, everything all together, and we try and find a spot for them.
Okay.
O'Leary and Verness.
I think that's it, Chairperson. I'll let others ask some questions. Thank you.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on the registry numbers, so that is broken down. That is broken down. I see it here, and I just want to say that your deputy was into the standing committee. He said he was going to put out the numbers, and those were just released, I think, last week. So I'm looking at the numbers right now. But it's broken down into regions or areas, Kings, Queens, and Prince. But we just talked about looking at it by district basis. Are those numbers broken down? The people on the registry, are they broken down by people in the district, in districts?
They're not broken down by district. They are broken down into community areas. And so that's one thing that, you know, like you said, we recently put out the totals by county. And again, I'm working with the department, and there's some considerations to have about actually publishing those numbers broken down further. But if you wanted to know the numbers for Charlottetown, I would definitely be willing to work with you one-on-one to share that information.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Yeah, because those are important. And I mean, before we looked at this list, it was hovering around 1,000, and there was members of your department that came into the standing committee, and we're seeing the list at 429 now. Mixed in with rental vouchers, there's no place for, like, I'm just worried that
I don't know how people got off that list. It seems like it's going down. It's at 429 now. I'm worried that that's not an accurate reflection of the demand that's out there. Have you looked deep into that list, or can you give us a little bit more information about how that works?
Yes, yeah, and so, I mean, I was at that standing committee meeting as well prior to me being minister, and those were some of the questions I was asking as well. And so I've tried to dig deeper into it and understand the acuteness of the need as well, right? I mean, I can tell you that as of March 31st, in Charlottetown, we had 39 households on the list for seniors and 135 families on the list in terms of like households. So that total would be 174 households on that list in the Charlottetown area. So obviously, when we're talking about using our various programs to help those people find housing, you know, like the Affordable Housing Development Program, we would be looking at you know, putting a large percentage of those units probably in Charlottetown.
Okay, that's
Charlottetown West Royalty.
It's interesting you just said that, because the last year when you said that this government's falling behind on the housing stuff, we've been talking about what are you building in Charlottetown, and I think the message was, well, private developers are building, but the list isn't going down. And with 135 families and 39 seniors on that list, it just becomes the need is greatest in Charlottetown. But I'll give a compliment, and I'm excited about. I saw a tender out in District 14 in my district for a 30-unit Beach Grove Seniors housing unit complex. Do you have any information on that? When is it closing? When is it being built? And anything in your books?
So, I mean, we have a number of housing projects on the go in Charlottetown, and I think what you've seen, as you referenced from that committee meeting, we've seen the housing registry, the numbers drop dramatically because we are finding housing for people. So Ironwood Estates.
Actually, it's
Okay. Well, I want to give you a summary of all the projects in Charlottetown. So Ironwood Estates, there's 8 units that are going to open in June. We've got we've got another 32 that are going to open in August, September this year. The Parkdale Sherwood Lions Club has a great project underway, and we're hoping to open by the end of this year. We don't have an exact date yet. That's 16 there. We've got the ones you're referring to. These are 30 units, and really the design was just awarded for those, as you mentioned. So it's going to take a couple of years to build them, unfortunately, but we're looking at early 2023 to have them open.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at the numbers. When you said 39 seniors housing in Queens County, the list is only 49. So a lot of those, the demand is very, very strong in Charlottetown, and I'm kind of a little bit questioning those numbers a little bit at 49. I think there's a little bit more of a demand than that, but that's another story. But that list, when your deputy minister was in, he committed to the seniors housing program, the seniors housing registry. He committed to getting that number down to 0 by October when he was in the standing committee. Is your department still on track to bring that number down to 0?
Well, I mean, we're opening up 8 plus 32 would be 40, plus potentially another 16, so that's 56, and based on definitely 40 targeted to have done by October, but possibly those additional 16 as well. So that's how we're reducing it to 0, and that of course this is just just a couple of programs. So.
And
Charlottetown West Royalty.
I guess this isn't a game with numbers and sheets and looking at getting this down. This is kind of going back to my colleague from O'Leary and Vanessa. This is affordability. Affordability is rising across the province. The seniors are aging.
We've been through a pandemic. There's a lot of people struggling out there. Are you looking at changing the criteria to make it onto this list, Minister?
I haven't discussed that yet, you know, raising the threshold, as it were. Something I'd be willing to look at. Have to be very diligent and careful when we do those sorts of things. But one thing with the, well, I'll take that under advisement for sure. I think I'm open to suggestions. I think that's a great idea. We'll take a look at it. I think it would be safe to say that the department looks at that on an ongoing basis as well, right? And so I would like to go back and talk to them more about it.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Just a couple of questions about Smith Lodge for a second, if that's okay with the minister. So the grants to the Salvation Army for the Smith Lodge, $643,500. That's an increase of almost $300,000 if I'm looking at this number correctly. The facility was purchased for $1.3 million. When I saw the numbers, I thought it was going to be a 28-bed facility, and that's what I thought. It was going to be a 28-bed facility. We talked about the number being 20. With the low occupation, with the low occupancy rates, does that affect your contract at all with the Salvation Army?
I don't know, Lane, do you want to start with that? There's a couple questions in there.
Yeah, I'll take that back. The adjustment that you see from the forecast compared to the budget this year, so the forecast represented being operational again partway through the year. Smith Lodge was acquired early in the last fiscal year, so the increase to the budget this year represents the full year allocation. But I'll get back to you on that question.
Yeah, and the revised numbers for Smith Lodge, 18 beds when it's full. 9 are currently being used. And what was your final question there?
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Is that going to be based on, if the beds aren't operational, the taxpayers of Prince Edward Island are on the hook for a large sum of money going to the Salvation Army. The beds aren't even accessible or being used, but we've paid them this contract. Is there a chance to renegotiate? That seems like an awful lot of money for 9 beds. So I'm just saying is that the beds aren't even operational or being used. You know, why are we paying the full amount for a contract when we're not getting service for that?
Money budget goes on just for those beds, right? That's the total.
That's
here. And maybe Elaine can just break down the budget again on how it's allocated for the various work that Salvation Army does. You know what? Just to make sure we get that right, I'll bring that back to you because I think it's a very good question.
Okay, honorable members, we are now moving on to a opposition time.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair, that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall carry?
Carry.
That's the start. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House having under consideration the grant of supply to Her Majesty, I beg leave to report the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Short carry. The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke that Order 23 be now read.
Short carry.
Carried.
Order 23, an act to amend the Health Services Act, Bill number 106, ordered for third reading.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that the said bill be now read a third time.
Should carry.
Carried.
Bill number 106, an act to amend the Health Services Act, read a third time.
Honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that the said bill do now pass.
Honourable members, this is a bill introduced by leave of the House, read a first time, read a second time, committed to a committee of the whole House, reported, agreed to, with amendment, read a third time, and is now moved that the bill do not pass. All those in favour say yea. Yea. Contrary, nay. Honourable members, bill is passed. The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I call motion 29 be now read.
Shall carry.
Carried.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition moves, seconded by the Honourable Member for Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, the following motion. Whereas supported decision-making is a mechanism used when adults with various challenges or disabilities choose trusted friends or family members to help them make decisions. And whereas the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities says that governments at all levels must ensure that adults with disabilities have whatever supports they need to enjoy their legal capacity. And whereas the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states that every individual is equal before the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. And whereas persons with disabilities and cognitive challenges by law have the same right to self-determination as all other Canadians. And whereas Prince Edward Island has traditionally been a leader in this area, having passed supported decision-making legislation in 1998, though it was never proclaimed. And whereas the organizations who belong to the PEI-supported decision-making coalition have been working with governments on Prince Edward Island for many decades to develop and bring forward supported decision-making legislation. Therefore be it resolved that government commit to immediately identifying a dedicated individual to complete drafting of supported decision-making legislation. Therefore be it further resolved that government commit to fulsome consultation with all stakeholders and to bring completed supported decision-making legislation forward in the 2021 fall sitting of this legislature.
The Honourable Leader of the official opposition to start the debate.
Thank you so much, Speaker. So I've had the privilege now of sitting in this House for 6 years, and there are a very few issues that have been on my desk for that entire time. Creating supported decision-making legislation for islanders who are affected by disabilities or cognitive impairments is one of that list of issues. I want to first acknowledge that many individual islanders and community organizations have been advocating for a long time many successive PEI governments to make this happen, and that without their advocacy over many decades, we would not be as far along the road to creating this charter right to self-determination for all islanders as we currently are. So thank you to all of those people who have worked collectively for so long on this issue, most recently under the name of the PEI Coalition for Supported Decision-Making. It is absolutely my honor and my privilege to bring this issue to the floor of the House through this motion. Most of us take for granted the right to make independent decisions, whether that be on our health, our finances, our living arrangements, or any other aspect of our lives. We live in a free society, after all, don't we? Well, sadly, it's not as free for some islanders as others. While removing a person's ability to make their own choices is often done with the best of intentions and of providing protection and care, it can often lead to the loss of that person's dignity, a diminished sense of empowerment, and fewer opportunities to participate fully in community. This is one of the many ways that persons with disabilities and cognitive impairments are treated unequally, they're treated and marginalized, and they are left vulnerable in Canadian society. The right to make decisions based on your personal values and the right to build a life of your own choosing is protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And for those people with disabilities, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. According to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I quote, "Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability." So, persons with disabilities and cognitive challenges explicitly in law have the same right to self-determination as all other people living in Canada. In March 2010, Canada ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and in so doing they agreed, and I quote, "to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities." The principles of the Convention include, and again I quote, "full and effective participation and inclusion in society," and later, "respect for inherent dignity, individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices, and the independence of persons." So, at a national level, through our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and internationally as a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it is clear that in law, persons with disabilities must be granted the same rights as all other citizens. So how do we accomplish that? What is the mechanism? It is supported decision-making legislation. What is supported decision-making? Well, it's decision-making when adults who have different challenges or disabilities choose trusted friends or family members to help them make decisions. It's as simple as that. For decades, adults with intellectual disabilities, seniors with memory loss or early stages of dementia, and adults with autism have had their rights to make decisions taken away from them, which can often make them feel like they don't have control over their lives and that they lose some of their dignity. If Prince Edward Island had a supported decision-making law, the rights of persons with different challenges to make their own decisions with the support of the people that they choose would be recognized in law. Supported decision-making would be available to everybody over the age of 18, regardless of their level of ability or their level of disability. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities says that our governments need to make sure that adults with disabilities have whatever supports they need to, and this is the phrase they use, enjoy their legal capacity. The PEI-supported decision-making coalition is asking government to create a supported decision-making law so that this can happen. The law would allow for the creation of agreements based on the needs of each unique individual to be supported in the appropriate way for their particular needs by people of their choosing. And here are some of the discussions and the thoughts that would have to take place in creating these unique individual agreements. Firstly, what types of decision does this person want and need help with? Because not all people with disabilities or cognitive challenges need help in all of decisions. Secondly, do they want particular people to support them with certain types of decisions, such as decisions about housing or finances or daily activities or their health? Thirdly, how will the person and their supporters communicate with each other? That would be included in the agreement. And fourthly, how do the supporters understand their role? For example, supporters may help their friend to understand information or to explore what kinds of choices may be available to them and the effects of making particular decisions. Once the agreement is completed, it could be presented whenever it's necessary to make sure that third parties, and by that I mean banks, service providers, lawyers, healthcare professionals, for example, understand how this person makes decisions. A supported decision-making agreement would be a useful tool for a family who want to make sure that their family member has the help they need to make decisions to lead the life they choose, even when other family members are no longer around. British Columbia's supported decision-making law, called the Representation Agreement Act, provides individuals and families with an alternative to the costly and difficult legal processes such as power of attorney and guardianship, which end up taking away the rights of the people to make their own decisions. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to this important initiative, and I look forward to full support of this motion, and more importantly, to legislation coming to this province in the very near future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, the opposition whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's an honor to rise today in support of this motion. Supportive decision-making is about empowering and ensuring all people are able to have control over their own lives in a way that works best for them. To have autonomy, working with chosen, trusted friends or family members to help and support them in making decisions that will impact their lives. For many, this trusted individual may be a family member. However, supportive decision-making legislation would allow an individual to decide who they trust and can work with best in this supportive role, as well as allowing families to plan for the future and transitions that may occur as family members age and they may no longer be able to provide that support. There's a broad consensus on the importance of supportive decision-making, Mr. Speaker, across community organizations that engage with and support adults living with disabilities and challenges, including intellectual disabilities. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition mentioned the incredible advocacy work of the PEI Supportive Decision-Making Coalition, and I just want to quickly mention some of the organizations involved with that coalition. So the PEI Association of Community Living, Seniors United Network, PEI Council of People with Disabilities, PEI People First, PEI Citizens Advocacy, the Autism Society of PEI, Stars for Life Foundation, and PEI Special Olympics. Supportive decision-making is something that has been advocated for decades here in PEI, and it's my understanding that in recent years, governments here have come close to making this a reality. And there has even been some progress toward drafting this legislation. However, no government yet has been able to get this across the finish line. To do so, and I want to really stress this, will require dedicated staff time to work with advocates and those living with disabilities and engage in consultation with all stakeholders. With this dedicated support, it should be possible to finally bring forward supportive decision-making legislation in the 2021 fall sitting of this legislature. And Mr. Speaker, I look forward to that happening. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in the Department of Social Development and Housing, of course, supporting persons with disabilities is one of the key important roles that we play. And of course, as mentioned, some persons with cognitive disabilities, like everyone, may need help in making decisions. So my department has been engaging with the Supported Decision-Making Coalition, as the Leader of the Opposition mentioned, for a considerable amount of time. And the members of this group have shown immense dedication in advocating for people with decision-making needs. The coalition includes members who would benefit from supported decision-making legislation, as the Leader of the Opposition eloquently said. They've carried out research and held meetings of interested islanders to gather information and share experiences. And I would like to just right now acknowledge their good, really their fantastic work over a long, long period of time. So, Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to ensuring that all citizens are able to exercise their rights. This includes respecting the Charter and recognizing our obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Mr. Speaker, persons with disabilities and cognitive challenges have the same rights over self-determination as all other Canadians. These rights include having a trusted friend or family member with them and help them when making decisions, if they choose to. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to inform the House that the government will commit to assigning a resource to continue drafting the supported decision-making legislation as requested in the motion with the goal of having the legislation available for the fall sitting of this year. Mr. Speaker, the proposed act will make it clear that all citizens are presumed to have capacity to make decisions on their own. They can make decisions with support if they choose, and that is their right to do so. Mr. Speaker, ensuring that citizens are fully able to exercise their rights is a priority for my department and for this government. Thank you.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to rise and say I support this motion, and you know, as someone who's just new into this house, I would think is one of the most interesting and meaningful conversations was with this group when we had this discussion. And I believe it's about empowerment, and I believe it's about making it better. People's wellness is important. Feeling that you can trust that supportive person that you have is very, very important. Do a lot of work with Stars for Life. I do a lot of work around the community with people with cognitive disabilities, and they're very important. They have a spark. They have a light, and I think that light could only grow stronger if they feel more empowered to trust the people that are going to be supportive of them, and to make sure that somebody is out there watching for their best interests. I'd applaud the minister for looking at one of these clauses and taking action to look at the fall, because I know the government has been looking at this in various ways. It's important to them, and I think that all together in this legislature we can work together on this to get this passed and to do something very, very special. That's important to Islanders, and I fully support this motion, and I fully support what the minister's statement was. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to the mover of the motion, the honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. I firstly want to thank Tyne Valley Sherbrooke for seconding this motion, for the Minister for his remarks. I'll say a little bit more about that shortly, and for Charlottetown West Royalty for his support also. There was a lot of cheering going on around the island, I would suspect, 5 minutes ago when the Minister made the announcement that he just did. Many people, as he quite rightly pointed out, have worked on this for a very long time. And to finally have a very explicit commitment both to staff resources and to the legislation coming forward in this calendar year will be a source of great pleasure and joy to them. And of course, to the many Islanders who are living with disabilities and cognitive impairments, for whom this is what this is all about, in order to grant them the rights under the law that they are absolutely due. So thank you, Minister, for that very unambiguous statement that you made. I want to mention a couple of names who would have been cheering. Hopefully they are able to watch this afternoon. Julie Smith, Rosalind Waters, Natalie Walsh-Anand, Charity Sheehan, Ron Kelly, Twyla Stone, and Phil Ferraro, amongst many others who have been working on this file for a very long time. It's about upholding the law, whether that be the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms or the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is, as West Royalty just mentioned, it's about empowerment, and it's about dignity, and it's about equity. And it's about moving Prince Edward Island to our rightful place as a progressive province in this country. So I thank everybody who spoke to this. I look forward to full support of this motion, but most importantly, I look forward to persons with disabilities here on Prince Edward Island having those rights that they so dearly deserve. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, honourable members, I'll call for the question. All those in favour of the motion say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All those against say nay. Honourable member, your motion passed unanimously. The honourable member from Mermaid, Stratford, and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I call motion 28 be now read.
Shall I carry?
Carry.
Motion 28 is under debate, and a debate was adjourned by the honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park to resume debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I just have a question. If memory serves me correctly, we were speaking to the amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So if...
Yes.
So if I have nothing more to say on the amendment, we let it go to... Okay, so I was finished speaking to the amendment.
And the Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning, and the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Mr. Speaker, I can close debate unless there's any additional.
Oh, you... Oh, she moved.
No, the amendment. The amendment. The minister.
Oh, you moved the amendment?
Yes.
Oh, no, you already moved. So,
Okay.
is there anybody else that'd like to speak to the amendment? There's no one else? The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to close
Just
debate
a
on
point.
the amendment, and I welcome the vote.
Okay. We'll have the vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say yay.
Yay.
All those against, say nay. Honorable members, the amendment has passed. Now we'll go to the motion. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to the motion?
Motion 28,
Yes. The honourable member from Cornwall Meadowbanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, calling on government to increase play-based learning in public schools, I think is a great idea. Mr. Speaker, we are seeing it in real time. Children today are not getting as much activity and exercise in their daily lives. Studies from around the country are showing us the same data. More needs to be done to ensure that our children are not just learning curriculum, but learning with an experience and importance of health living at every opportunity. In the last 10 years, we've seen a greater reliance on digital entertainment and a shift away from what many in this chamber would consider traditional playtime. That is not a criticism of our children, our parents, educators, or governments. It's simply a fact. With the incredible growth and expansion in technological and entertainment industries, it's only natural that more people migrate towards those outlets as access to them becomes easier and more abundant. We know the importance of following the science, and play-based learning is an evidence-based approach to earlier years development. What we need in this province is a government who is open and willing to support our educators in achieving increased play-based learning in our school systems. In order to do this successfully, it will take a real commitment from government to see this implemented island-wide. Mr. Speaker, teachers, administrators, educational assistants, and everyone in our school system understands the importance of our children realizing their full potential. And we all know that healthy living and wellness is critical to that goal. We as legislators must put our island students first, but we must ensure we are following the science. We see lots of scholarly articles and research highlighting the benefits of play-based learning up to the age of 8. Yet I have failed to see much research that suggests play-based learning in high school or junior high age students should be prioritized over critical life skills needed to be successful in the later years. The final, therefore it be resolved, states that we should urge government to work with our educators to implement exclusive and increased play-based curriculum across all public schools branch. I see this oddly as an urged request, Mr. Speaker, and one that I do not see grounded in much research. At this point, I would like to offer an amendment that would allow us to maintain the integrity of this motion, which I believe was brought forward with the best intentions, while also allowing us to keep the scope of it grounded in reality. And I have an amendment to the motion, Mr. Speaker.
Do you have copies?
Yep.
Everybody got a copy? Honorable member, can you move your motion, your amendment with a seconder?
I move this motion, Mr. Speaker, seconder Larry Inverness. Speak to the motion. Yeah, can I speak to it? Speak to the motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, this...
Did you read the amendment already?
What? No. No.
You read your full amendment. You're moving the full amendment, and you're seconder. Read your full amendment.
I move an amendment that at first, therefore it be resolved clause, remove the words exclusive and replaced with increased. In the therefore it be resolved clause, remove the words exclusive or insert the words up to grade 3 after the words grades on PEI. And I so move, and seconded by the member from Larry Inverness.
Is there anyone that would like to speak to the amendment?
Sorry.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to speak. This is, I'm very supportive of this motion. It's exciting to see us talk about activity in the school system for kids, and I completely believe in it. And I want to support this amendment because I think that to a certain age, we need to increase that. We need more activity in general. But as you get going, as you get older, it becomes a little bit more difficult to incorporate with the efficiency that you're looking at making that change in the school system. I'll give you an example, Mr. Speaker. If you're to go in with some music for grade 1 students and do a whole gym full of grade 1 students, everybody's going to get it. You could do anything, and they're going to be engaged and excited. If you go into that same group 10 years later, it becomes very difficult to do the same thing when kids are in grade 11 and 12. A lot of kids get it, a lot of them do it, but they need to learn. They're learning at a different rate. And I've seen this firsthand. It works at times, but it's a little bit more difficult. But I really think that if we can increase the amount of activity, whether it be in the daycare setting, and I was excited about just doing that just recently, all the way up in those young ages, it becomes incredibly important. We need to focus on that at the other levels, but we'll look at the younger ages, and this amendment is solid. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You adjourn debate, remember?
I'll adjourn debate. Oh.
You're a seconder?
O'Leary and Vaness.
The honourable member from Tignish, Pomeroy, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Conflict of Interest Act, and I move, seconded by the honourable member from Mermaid Stratford, that the same be now received and read a first time.
Shall carry.
Bill number 112, an act to amend the Conflict of Interest Act, read a first time.
The honourable member from Tignish, Pomeroy, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends the current Conflict of Interest Act in line with the 2015 report of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner.
Shall carry. The honourable member from Tignish, Pomeroy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill to be intituled an act to amend the Public Interest Disclosure and Whistleblower Protection Act, and I move, seconded by the member from Morel Dona, that the same be now received and read a first time.
Shall carry.
Bill number 111, an act to amend the Public Interest Disclosure and Whistleblower Protection Act, read a first time.
Honourable member from Tignish, Pomeroy, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends the Parent Act in order to ensure that if the House decides, the Commissioner in the Act and the Ombudsperson can be the same person.
So carried. Honorable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the leader of the third party, that the order number 26 of the day be now read.
So carried.
Order 26, an act to amend the Audit Act, Bill number 109, ordered for second reading.
The honorable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the honorable leader of the third party, that the said bill be now read a second time.
So carried.
Bill number 109, an act to amend the Audit Act, read a second time.
The honorable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the honourable leader of the third party, that this House do now resolve itself into committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
So carried. The honorable member from Charlottetown, Winslow, to chair the committee of the whole House, please. First time.
House is now committee of the whole to take into consideration a bill to be intituled, an act to amend the Audit Act. Is it the pleasure of the committee that the bill be now read clause by clause, or open it up to questions from the floor? As a whole? Just open it up, did I hear?
Yeah.
Perfect.
And we're going to bring a stranger onto the floor.
The request by the promoter is to have a stranger come on the floor. Be it granted?
Granted.
Welcome. Could you please say your name for Hansard and your name and your title, please?
Joey Jeffrey, Clerk of the Legislative Assembly.
Thank you and welcome. So we're just going to open this up, the Audit Act, open it up to questions. Would you first, promoter, like to maybe give a brief description?
Sure, thank you very much, Chair. Basically, this bill changes the appointment process for the Auditor General. Instead of requiring an additional step via an order in council, the Legislative Assembly is responsible for the appointment of this statutory officer. This is in line with other similar positions and ensures that all members have an equal say in the appointment process. It also aligns the functions of the Audit Committee, made up of 2 members, and the Speaker is Chair to the Standing Committee on Legislative Assembly Management. This change also ensures consistency with the other statutory officers.
All right, thank you very much, Promoter. Just want to know if anyone has any questions from the floor. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Chair. Promoter, I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. I appreciate Joey being the expert on the floor to talk about this. And I think just for the record, it is important that we have, because this is the first bill that we have brought to, that you, as Deputy Speaker, I think have brought to the floor through legislative management. Second, excuse me. The Audit Committee now, there were, when it, well, I guess it's still in existence until we pass this piece of legislation, but as one of 3 people who sits on that committee, can you just explain, Joey, what the history behind that was and why the Audit Committee was structured as it was, and perhaps potential problems with that this legislation is meant to deal with?
So from our research, we found that the Audit Committee was struck sometime in the 70s. It was an amendment to the Audit Act back then, and it was designed to add an extra level of independence to the Auditor General Office. The Audit Committee, as it's made up now, is the Speaker as Chair, the Minister of Finance, and the Leader of the Opposition are the official committee members that are actually written into the Act. I think that in line with other statutory officers having so the functions of the Audit Committee are really to primarily approve the budget of the Auditor General, and it's to recommend an appointment to the House, and it is to, if there are problems that the Auditor General is running into, that the Auditor General can go to that committee and see if the solution can be reached. It's a different procedure than the other statutory officers that would have their budget approved through the Standing Committee on Legislative Assembly Management. The recommendation to the House for appointment would come through that committee, and the committee would have general, I guess, input on administration matters in some of these statutory officers. So it's really not so much of a problem, I would say, but more an alignment with one committee being responsible for the administration of the Legislative Assembly and ensuring consistency with those committees and with the statutory officers.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Chair. And, I have the pleasure and privilege of sitting on LMC, of course, and have been party of these discussions over the last little while. And the province has come a long way in terms of improving openness and transparency when it comes to appointments, regardless of where that is within government. And I've always been a very staunch advocate of being as open and transparent in all the appointments that are brought forward. So for me, this is a very big step forward in that it doesn't go through Executive Council now, it goes through this legislature, and prior to that goes through LMC, which is, of course, now manned by equal representation from each province, from each caucus, excuse me. I just wanted to hear, Joey, what the rationale behind this. Of course, I fully support the changes that are here, and anything that moves us towards greater transparency and accountability is something that I support. So, thank you, Chair.
Is there any other questions? Shall the bill carry?
Carry.
I move the title.
An act to amend the Audit Act. Shall it carry?
I move the enacting clause.
Shall it carry? Being enacted by the Lieutenant Governor and the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Prince Edward Island as follows. Shall it carry?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report that the bill agreed to without amendment.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
I read this Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the whole House, having had under consideration a bill to be intituled an Act to amend the Audit Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the said bill and has agreed to the same without amendment. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall carry.
Carried.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the leader of the third party, that the 27th order of the day be now read.
Shall carry.
Order 27, Ombudsperson Act, Bill number 110, ordered for second reading.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the honourable leader of the third party, that the said bill be now read a second time.
Shall carry.
Bill number 110, Ombudsperson Act, read a second time.
The honourable member from Tignish, Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the honourable leader of the third party, that this House do now resolve itself in committee of the whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall carry. Honourable member from Charlottetown, Winslow, Chair of the Committee of the whole House, please.
The House is now in committee of the whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled the Ombudsperson Act. Is it the pleasure of the committee that the bill be read clause by clause or open to the whole House? Whole House, perfect. Is it the possibility of granting permission to bring a stranger onto the floor? Thank you and welcome, and please say your name for and position for answer.
Joey Jeffrey, Clerk of the Legislative Assembly.
Okay, perfect. Promoter, maybe you could give a brief description of the bill.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. And on behalf of the Legislative Management Committee, I bring this bill forward. It's the ombudsperson position was originally created in Sweden in the early 1800s. The translation of the word means an investigator of citizens' complaints. The proposed bill creates an office of the ombudsperson with authority to investigate and, if possible, resolve complaints made by person or party against a wide range of public bodies. The ombudsperson will be a statutory officer of the Legislative Assembly. The bill provides for an appointment and compensation of the ombudsperson and sets out their powers and duties. It also prescribes the investigation, resolution, and report process.
Perfect, thank you. So we will open the floor for questions. Is there any questions? Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, I want to say how thrilled I am that this bill is before the House. It was in both, I think I'm right in saying this government's platform prior to the last election, and certainly in our party's platform prior to the last election, I'm not sure about the third parties, that a commitment to install an ombudsperson here on Prince Edward Island. So this has been a long time coming, and it's something I've talked about for many years in this legislature. So I'm really happy that it's here. I'm not sure if there are any other people with questions, Chair. I have an amendment, a couple of small amendments actually, for section 18, which is a fair ways through the bill. So I don't want to assume that we can just jump there and do that. I'll step back and we can check the floor.
Would the committee like to go right to the amendment now? I know there is another member who does have questions. Do you prefer to go to the questions or go to the amendment?
I would call for question 4.
Okay.
Any question before the amendment, before that section, I would deal with that.
Okay. I'm going to allow one question. The Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, and Public Safety.
Just, thank you, Chair. I just have one question to the clerk. The ombudsman's person staff, how does that determined? Like, how many and how big is the office and how wide a scope do they have?
So ultimately, that would be determined by the Standing Committee on Legislative Assembly Management, based on information recommendation from the ombudsperson themselves. But yes, that's who would eventually determine that.
So does the Standing Committee have a, oh, sorry.
Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, and Public Safety, and Attorney General.
So does the Standing Committee have a idea right now, or like before?
They have
quite detailed legislation, so.
Absolutely. We didn't get into number of staff positions, but there was an overall budget number talked about in the between $300,000 and $400,000, probably something like that, to establish an office like that. And then based on similar to what we did with the Child and Youth Advocate, was to hire the statutory officer, give them the chance to determine the scope of their work, and then take recommendations from them on staffing levels and budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Is there no other questions? We do have one question from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Just a quick question. So one thing I noted when I was looking through the Police Act is that there's no mechanism in there around being able to file a complaint around a service related to police. So I'm wondering if the ombudsperson under this act, what their role would be to review or investigate a service related to a police service. Like a service or a policy, I guess, would be another example.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, member.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure either. All right, I guess just go ahead and move on with the amendment, and I'll process that response, I suppose.
There's no other questions? All right. Do you have Leader of the Opposition, do you have a copy of the amendment to?
I do indeed. The clerk has a copy sufficient for all the members in the House.
Okay, perfect. Would you like to read the amendment or answer?
I would. Thank you, Chair. Move that Bill 110 is amended by the addition of the following after subsection 18, sub 3. Exception/appointment. Section 4, Clause 1A, does not apply to an investigation related to a decision, recommendation, act, order, or omission of the Lieutenant Governor in Council, the Executive Council, or a committee of the Executive Council in relation to appointment of a person to an agency of government. And the second and closely related amendment to Bill 1110 is Bill 1110 is amended by the deletion of Section 26 and the substitution of the following. Section 26, disclosure of certain matters not required. 1, subject to subsection 2, the ombudsperson shall not require any information or answer to be given on, or any document, paper, or thing to be produced, as the case may be, if the Minister of Justice and Public Safety and Attorney General certifies to the ombudsperson that the giving of the information, the answering of the question, or the production of the document, paper, or thing might involve the disclosure of A, the deliberations of the Executive Council, or B, proceedings of the Executive Council or a committee of the Executive Council relating to matters of a secret or confidential nature, the disclosure of which would be injurious to the public interest. Non-application-appointments. 2. Subsection 1 does not apply to any document, paper, or thing that relates to the appointment of a person to an agency of government. And inclusion in report. Section 3, the ombudsperson shall report the receipt of every certificate pursuant to this section in the next annual report.
Thank you very much. Everybody has a copy of the amendment. Are there any questions or comments on the amendments? The Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Chair. This is a long amendment. What is the reasoning for this amendment?
Sorry, I appreciate the question, Minister.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Chair. We just passed a bill. I made some comments about how I think it's important that we're always moving towards greater openness and transparency and accountability when we make appointments, regardless of what they are. And this amendment allows, at the moment, any decision of Executive Council cannot be reviewed. And there's a good reason for that. Executive Council decisions are made in camera, and typically information related to them is not publicly available. And I have no issue with that. That's a convention that's in all Westminster governments. But this very narrow change that I'm suggesting here is related to people who are appointed to agencies, boards, and commissions. And I think it's really important that I give some context to this, Chair, so I'll just take a couple of minutes to do that.
That's fine.
There are literally hundreds of Islanders who sit on various agencies, boards, and commissions across the province, who devote a huge amount of time, are very dedicated, and have enormous knowledge in the area in which they have been granted this position to sit on an agency, board, or commission. And we, as a legislature and Islanders, owe them a large debt of gratitude for that. The history of appointments here on government appointments on PEI, of course, has traditionally been, and I'm going back quite a ways now, shrouded in mystery and tinged often by partisanship. We've come a long way since then, a huge way since then. But I mean, we all remember or have read about the times when governments changed hands, and the plough operator, for example, would hand the keys to the person from the party who's now in government to carry on the job. We've come a huge way past that. But I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we have as much transparency and openness and accountability as possible when it comes to all government appointments. So when it comes to agencies, boards, and commissions, this mechanism that this amendment provides gives confidence to islanders that all appointments are above reproach, and that we can ask, if anybody has a concern about it, they can ask the ombudsperson to look into it and confirm that there's nothing going on here. This is a perfectly legitimate appointment. So we can have that confidence that appointments to agencies, boards, and commissions are entirely above board. That is the purpose of this amendment, or these amendments, I should say. Excuse me.
The Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, and Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
So that's interesting. So just to get this straight, to understand this amendment, we are asking the ombudsman person they could possibly overrule any appointment? Are they checking on every appointment that Executive Council makes to, these are a lot of skilled and knowledge people that probably don't get reimbursed for their time. I really don't think they do. And I really wonder why we would have this, some would call it an overreach, when we already have, this is great legislation that's bringing oversight to a lot of government work. Is this taking it to the next level?
Leader of the Official Opposition?
Yes, I did.
The hour has been called.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall it carry?
Carry.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of Committee of the Whole House, having had under consideration a bill to be intituled the Ombudsperson Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs to leave to sit again. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
So carried.
Carried. I don't know what else I need to take.
The honourable member from Morale, Mermaid, and Government Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Monty, that this House do adjourn until April 28th at 1 o'clock in the PM.
So carried.